Okay, it's a good morning from me over here in the UK. Some really interesting feedback from some of the videos I did yesterday. The French Rugby League history video got some really good feedback, and the football club histories, really good viewership figures from them. From even some of the older videos I did, the club history series has done really well. And also, big welcome to any new subscribers we've had because we've had a couple more new subscribers to the channel. So, thank you from me. If you are new to the live stream format, you've got to be a subscriber only mode is on, and you've got to be subscribed for I think 20 minutes or longer. So, there you go. Yeah, the Murdoch transfer. I mean, look, there's been allegations there that Arsenal were favourites to sign him, add him to their squad. I don't think Arsenal need to add much, to be brutally honest. Chelsea, I don't know, is that a panic buy from Chelsea? Graham Potter's under a lot of pressure. Is that a Potter signing, or is that a Todd Bowley putting pressure on the scouts and director of football to make a big name signing? I don't rate Murdoch, to be honest. I think he's overrated. I don't think he's worth 100 million. That is a panic buy to me. Arsenal were willing to come in with you know, a lower offer, and they were having proper discussions with the club, and they've been having discussions since the summer about a potential move. But I've been hearing all sorts of rumours. I think that is a panic buy. I think Chelsea have definitely overpaid. I think Arsenal would have overpaid for him. But that's the transfer market today. It is heavily overinflated and therefore isn't a realistic transfer market anymore. And you can blame Mbappe and Neymar for that. Quite honestly, with some of their transfers. I'm just having a Kit Kat. I know I've just started, but I'm just having a Kit Kat, having a snack. But no, I think Chelsea have overpaid. I'm being honest on that. I think they've overpaid by about 50 million. But what do I know? What do I know? But that to me sounds like panic buy. Personally, yes, Chelsea have been busy. They got João Felix in, admittedly online, but I think they have the option to sign at the end of the season. The Murdoch one, I think Arsenal will be frustrated that their transfer target that they've been in lengthy discussions even before the World Cup. I think they're going to be frustrated. But if you look at it, Chelsea are all over the place. I don't know how you fit him into their squad, and that to me is a concern. Yeah, João Felix, reckless challenge. I think he's trying too hard to impress the new club. Um, and Graham Potter's under a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure. We have to see how the second half of the season goes, but they're not getting a trophy this season. Simple. But then the more you find out about the Tuchel sacking, the more you understand that there were other things at play. Oh, if Arsenal win today, they're in a very strong position. Very strong position. But City losing yesterday helps them out anyway. City losing yesterday helps them out massively. Newcastle not being in the FA Cup, however, anymore is a problem because that reduces their fixture congestion. And so, in my opinion, two smallest clubs in London. That's a good one. That's a good one. You forgot. You've got Leighton Orient, and then they've got quite a big fan base. I think I've done all the club histories in London, if I'm not mistaken. I think I've done Palace as well. I think the only one I haven't done is AFC Wimbledon. And I would technically class Barnet as a London club as well. So I still have a couple of London club histories to do, and we shall do them in due course. But if Arsenal win today, I think they're in a healthy position. Everton's a mess. I can't see Lampard seeing out the season. I'm not that I want to see managers get sacked. I really don't. I really get frustrated with the managerial turnover. But Everton are in trouble. Yeah, but it looked like that in '98, and they survived on the last day of the season. So in my lifetime, Everton have been here twice before, and but there's reasons why Everton have struggled. I mean, look, the last time they won a trophy, I was 6 or 5, 5.5, 6. Yeah, 95. Yeah, last time they won a trophy was 1995. Um, well, because of that lack of success over a significant period of time, there are more fans who support Liverpool in Merseyside than Everton now by 2 to 1. Traditionally, that wasn't the case, but Everton, unfortunately, have gone through this lengthy spell now. It's nearly 30 years, lengthy spell, with only one FA Cup final since their last trophy. So when you got youngsters coming up, and look, this is not the first time there's. I I've heard. I mean that is completely unnecessary, but it's happened at many clubs. It's happened at a lot of clubs around Europe and South America where um, really passionate fans have allowed their frustrations with how the club is being run or the performances on the pitch to boil over in such a way. And you may laugh at that, but in a city like Liverpool, which is football mad, which is not the wealthiest city in the country, has high deprivation, football is an escape for these people. It's the old adage of Roman bread and circuses. It is an escape for these people from a city which has got a bad reputation for gang crime, um, a higher murder rate than, let's say, up the road in Blackpool or Blackburn or Preston or the towns and cities in Lancashire. It is a city that has a lot of social divides and a lot of deprivation, and football is an escape for these people. It is. I've been to Liverpool. I've watched games in Liverpool. It is an escape for these people, and I can understand their frustrations. I can. The team isn't doing very well. Hasn't done very well for a long, long time. Um, and it. I will say this: the ownership over a significant. This is also Bill Kenwright as well. This is not just Morshy. This is also Kenwright and what came before. Um, uh, it's a mess. And then you look at the bottom, and you look at from I think 14th downwards. There's like 2 points covering like 6 teams, and then you get to mid-table, and it's only like 7 points covering half the league. Any club could get relegated this season. But West Ham and Everton are both in serious trouble. There's West Ham fans calling for David Moyes to be given the chop. Everton fans are calling for Lampard and the whole board to go. Like the situation in regards to what's happening at Goodison, I don't know what to make of it really. As an Everton supporter, this is the lowest moment the whole time I've followed them. We've now had a low moment. I would say 98 is pretty close. 98 is pretty. They got lucky in 98. Bolton had a goal disallowed that should have stood. I think it was a draw against Everton. That ultimately the goal difference is the reason why Everton got out that year. Um, but no, Everton are in trouble. There's a whole host of clubs in trouble. Really, half the league could get relegated if you look at it. It's the top half of the table, which is where the surprises are. I mean, Fulham, I'm surprised Fulham are doing as well as they are. Can they keep that momentum going? Brentford, they're refreshing to see them play. Brighton, since Graham Potter left, have got better. The grand scheme of things, last year we only stood up because that stopped the oil protest. The white middle class nerd who tied himself to a goalpost, he should have stayed there really for the whole game. He wasn't in any danger of getting hit by anything, because Everton could hit a barred door. I think the situation with several clubs is concerning, but Everton there's been a lot of mismanagement for a long time. Yeah, there are some players on some big money at these clubs. Yes, Everton have spent over £500 million in the last couple of years, and they've had some top quality managers. Rafa Benitez and Ancelotti couldn't get this side firing on all cylinders. I'm surprised Ancelotti left as quickly as he did. I think something's gone very wrong there. I know I'm back to Real Madrid, but something has gone off there. Something behind the scenes doesn't make a lot of sense to me with that one. Fair play to Wolves, but the manager David Moyes putting Cresswell a full back into a centre back position whilst they have two on the bench, putting Pablo for. Uh, yeah, there is something. There's something going on with West Ham. They look a little bit lost. But you look how congested it is at the bottom of the table. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Bournemouth's goal difference is because of that one game against Liverpool. Otherwise, they got a better goal difference. And then you look at the teams that have changed manager: Wolves, Bournemouth, Southampton. You know, do I rate David Moyes? I think he had a good spell at Everton, a lengthy spell at Everton. They gave him time. I mean, it's only by 5 margins they lost that cup final. They win that cup final, the trajectory takes a different course. Manchester United was not a good fit. We all can agree that. I think that created a loss of confidence in David Moyes. Obviously, his time at Sunderland was a shambles. A Real Sociedad didn't work, and he sort of found a home at West Ham. They had a good season last season. They had a good season the season before, to be fair. West Ham is just, we'll see. Man United signing Weghorst, Dutch manager signs Dutch player. It's no surprise to me. He scores a goal every 2 games. So he's got a good return. He's a target man, which they've been lacking. He can link up play, and look what he did at the World Cup for Holland as an impact sub. The Argentinians couldn't deal with him, and that second goal from the free kick was hilariously Dutch. It's the best way to describe it. Um, but his time at Burnley didn't work. Now, I think that was more due to the style of football Burnley were playing and the position Burnley were in. But Walt Weghorst is a decent player. He's not world class. He's decent. He's solid, and it's more of a stopgap this season while United figure out where Ten Hag figures out certain things. The Ronaldo situation has come and gone, and that situation I think was badly handled by all parties. It does sum up still some of the issues that are going on. Should West Ham fans protest next week against Everton whilst the board are still coming to terms with the death of David Gold? Both Everton and West Ham fans are frustrated right now, and rightly so. Both clubs are at in a position they shouldn't be in, with the talent they have, the the players that have been signed by both clubs. In the terms of David Gold, dildo brother, I will say that because personally, with you look at their time involved with Birmingham City and some of the allegations against financial impropriety there, I don't know. I would say there's definitely a lingering resentment against the direction both clubs are taking. Everton's a more long term mess. West Ham have gone up and down the division, like Premier League, Championship, Premier League, Championship. There's been a bit of a yo-yoing with West Ham over the over the time, but no, Everton is a they've been in the top flight the longest. They've had the fewest seasons outside the top flight, but they haven't won a trophy since the 90s. And I did the club look at the club history. I did. They're a very successful side historically. Um, in regards to the stadium build, it's already caused political issues. We've discussed the situation with Liverpool City Council before. There's been a criminal investigation. There's a corruption investigation. There were some backhanders done. There was dodgy dealings to get that stadium done. It's cost Liverpool UNESCO World Heritage Site status and funding for having that status because it's altering the Docklands, which is a very historical part of the UK with the UK's history and all that. I mean, the Titanic's port of registry was Liverpool, for fuck's sake. Um, So the stadium was already being built on the cloud of corruption and criminality. But Bill Kenwright, going back 25 years, has been trying to get a new stadium for a long time. There's been plans been put on the table several times to replace Goodison, but because they don't want to do what Liverpool have done with Anfield and build in place and do the refurb stand by stand, they want to have a brand new, stadium, and they've chosen the Docklands location. Um, I don't know how Everton fans as a whole fan base, if you were to do a survey in regards to the stadium, whether they're in favour or they want to keep Goodison. Now, Goodison needs upgrading. I think that's where this lies. But this has been a 25-year process. Bill Kenwright's been trying to build a new stadium for 25 years. Now he's got the Morshy money coming in, being misspent, but the whole thing is a bit of a shambles. But Everton haven't won a trophy for so long. It's starting to get concerning. They're staring the Championship and the Football League in the face with both barrels, and I fear if they get relegated, they're not coming back. I fear they could do a Bradford City, for example, and end up in the bottom tier of the Football League, or they could do a Leeds and spend the best part of a decade and a half outside the top flight, or they could do a Blackburn and drop down to the third tier for a year and then miss out on promotion year after year after year after promising starts. I'm a Blackburn fan. We are third right now, but we're trying our best to foul it up, like we did last season, where we were in the playoffs and then ended up ninth. That's a thing. I do fear for Everton. West Ham, they fluctuated over the years. They've been up, they've been down. I think West Ham might get out of it, but uh, it's a situation that is interesting. Before the Premier League began, Everton had the second most league titles by Liverpool. Where they, yeah, as I said, they had a lot of trophies, and then they've only had one trophy in the Premier League era, and that's it. And that was 28 years ago. 28 years ago, they last won silverware. I mean, that's ridiculous. And yes, they were a bigger club than Man City. Yes, Man City obviously have benefited from a massive cash injection of oil money, and they still can't fill the empty Etihad. And I very rarely meet Man City fans. You wouldn't want in your CV as a player relegated with Everton, the first Everton team to be relegated in over 70 years. Look, they've had a very long. Every club goes through leaner spells. They do. Every club. Some clubs, the leaner spells are longer than others. Everton have had a very consistent spell in the top flight, but it's also a very mediocre spell in the top flight for a long time. Whilst they've been a top flight club, they have won a lot of silverware. Absolutely. They've also been very mediocre for a long period of time as well. And that mediocrity is catching up with them. Bad transfer decisions are catching up with them. They used to have a great youth system. They're not producing the youth talent at the level that they were a decade ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. That's caught up with them. They've sold some of their best youth talent. That's a problem. And they've misspent and mismanaged their transfers and their squad for a long time. They've been obsessed with it. They've been plans on the table for a new stadium to replace Goodison for a long time. So we'll see what happens. Man City losing the league is what they need to win the Champions League. Well, here's a funny fact: Guardiola hasn't won couldn't win the Champions League with a stacked Bayern side. Let that sink in. He couldn't win with Bayern, and he can't win it with Man City, but he won it with Barcelona. There is a correlation here. And with both Bayern and Man City, he's had record-breaking seasons. And yes, he had Messi, but Messi can't win outside Barcelona either. Yeah, he won the World Cup and the Copa America, but that's with international football was completely different to club football. So And what was proven the last couple of games is if you can stop the De Bruyne pass to Haaland, they can't win. You shut down De Bruyne, you shut down Haaland. Haaland really is very much a one-trick pony. He's brilliant going one way, and that's within 30 yards of the goal. Other than that, you've got 9 outfield players and a goalkeeper carrying him defensively. So it's basically like they're playing without that centre forward again. Except instead of having like 5 defenders and 5 midfielders, or 4 defenders and 6 midfielders, they have to carry a centre forward striker who can't defend. Kevin De Bruyne might be the best player not to win a Champions League at this rate. No, there were some pretty good players not to win European success. You could argue the timing of some of his transfers have also prevented him winning a Champions League or a Europa League for that matter. But at the same time, De Bruyne at the World Cup, I don't know. I think there's something about De Bruyne where he doesn't look happy, really. Sportsbook 23 subscribers from 1,000. I've never known a channel to go on such a long and epic journey. Well, look, if YouTube hadn't changed all the monetization rules a couple of times during the channel's existence, I think we would have been in a very healthy position by now. Had I started the channel a year earlier, we would have easily been a very stable, healthy channel. You can blame the Jake and Logan Paul for that, and what I call the reaction, the overreaction by Google, which is the parent, or Alphabet, which is the parent company, to the crisis and the backlash which resulted. And it was a fair backlash because, I mean, look, they've come in. One of them thinks he's a boxer, which he isn't, and the other one has tried to flog an energy drink that will kill you with another hopeless guy called Psy, KSI, whatever you want to call it. So, and they were told at the time they can no longer make a living and make money off the platform, yet they're making money off the platform, which is utter hypocrisy from Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, which is the parent company of YouTube. And let that sink in. I've got, I mean, they're airheads. They're successful at what they do by being vacuous airheads with no actual talent to do anything. They're really, they wouldn't survive actually in the real world with a real job. They wouldn't. And besides, I think the entire Belgian team, I think there is a massive division in the Belgian side. Massive division. It's well documented that Simon Mignolet, and Thibaut Courtois don't like each other. It's also well known that Thibaut Courtois and De Bruyne physically hate each other and have had to be separated in the past. Lukaku, it's a beer barrel with legs, clearly. And then Roberto Martinez, the fact he managed to keep getting them to the latter stages of tournaments until the last World Cup, is tells you all you need to know, really. And now he's gone and taken on the Portugal job, which comes with its own ball and chain, which is the Ronaldo situation, and clearly the toxic nature of the Ronaldo era. I don't know where Belgium go from here. I don't know where this group of players go from here, because they are ultimately a very talented group of individuals at what they do. But I've always said this: you can have a team of superstars and win absolutely nothing. Or you can have a team of players, regardless of ability, who work for each other and their cause and are successful. And Belgium aren't that. They don't work for each other. It doesn't matter the skill level. You might have a pretty average back four, solid but not outstanding, not really a threat going forward, but they're solid, defensively. Midfield, box to box, not really outstanding, but they know their role. Maybe a couple of wingers or an attacking midfielder with a bit of pace, and a centre forward who can hold the ball up, and they win everything. Um, Ronaldo going to Al Nassr, terrible for his legacy. I think what went wrong was about, I think, the last 3.5 years of his career. So just before the COVID pandemic, up till that interview with Piers Morgan in the World Cup. The warning signs were there when he went to Juventus. Fans were not happy. I overwhelmed with the decision. Um, and now we find that the club were having to be forced to cook the books in order to get that signing done. They were forced to fiddle the numbers. Ronaldo, to be fair, I've never been a Ronaldo fan. I'm not really a Messi fan either. I think the fanboys on the internet are still having their meltdown. I think we've lived in a generation that's actually been a lower quality of football um, than the than the previous generation of football. I think we've been treated to a lesser quality, and so two players seem to stand out above the rest because they're that little bit better. Um, if they were playing a decade earlier, they don't win as many Ballon d'Ors each. It's harder for them to establish their legacy. And they both fiddled their taxes in Spain, so they're not really great. And there's been rumours around Ronaldo's behaviour off the field, allegations of hush money being paid to certain individuals um, over his career. So yeah, England's so-called golden generation that never even reached the semis of any major international tournament, for example. Um, Again, that was clearly a squad where the club rivalries and personalities and the egos clearly disjointed the team. And whether it was Sven or Capello or whoever the manager was, McLaren, the Wally with the brolly, they couldn't get the egos in control and couldn't get the team focused on what was actually at hand because there was ultimately a very talented group of players. I don't think the media helped um, with that. I think the media in this country is just a toxic, vile mess anyway. Um, for decades, the sports media is just as bad as the main news section of newspapers and websites and television channels. Just as bad. There's a few independent journalists or independent publications or websites that I think rise above the sewer that is the mainstream. But in all reality, I feel a lot of sympathy um, for athletes in this country, footballers, rugby players, whatever it may be. I feel a lot of sympathy. I'm just going to get myself a bit more comfortable because my back is absolutely shot. I love having a job that ruins my body. There we go. There we go. That wasn't so bad, was it? It's funny. Everyone wants Southgate sad, but he's brought the most success to England since '66. He's made a final and he's fucked. You're judged on results. And percentage-wise, he's got the best win percentage of an England manager other than Sir Southampton. There is no doubt on that. We can accept that it's a results-based business. But I think he may have reached the ceiling he can reach with the group of players that he's got. Now, there could be some other young England players that come through in the next 18 months that obviously go to the next Euros. And that could create a different debate. I think Henderson and Kane are probably on the end of their England careers now. And that creates a different debate about the makeup of the team. But where the team are now to where they were when he took over in 2016 after um, uh, the Sam Allardyce incident, I think is the best way to describe that. The team is in a better place. having said that, I think I don't think he's the right guy to win a tournament with the team. I think he's laid the foundations for the next guy to come in, whoever that may be, and take the team from there. Whoever that next guy may be, and people were screaming for Graham Potter. It's not going well for Graham Potter right now. Eddie Howe's quite happy at Newcastle. Um, but remember this: certain Brian Clough, people were screaming for him to be made England manager. He ended up going to Leeds. Don Revie, the former Leeds manager, becomes England manager, has a terrible time. Brian Clough has a terrible time at Leeds, ends up at Nottingham Forest. The rest is history. So you can have a bad spell as a manager and be like, oh, this is all going horribly wrong. And I think that's what Graham Potter's doing right now, is having that unfortunate um, wrong fit with a club. He could go on to have great success with someone else. So with Eddie Howe, I mean, the way he lost his job at Bournemouth, um, he looked a bit broken. Look what he's doing at Newcastle. People criticised that appointment when it was made, um, and there we go. Yes, no England manager has ever won the Premier League. I think Howard Wilkinson with Leeds is the last English manager to lift the league title, and the last English manager to lift a major trophy is Harry Redknapp, the FA Cup with Portsmouth. So there is that. But no, it is very, very striking that the first two managers to win the Premier League were both Scottish, and that the next manager to win the Premier League was French. So there is that. But I think that's just where we are. Um, but it's just the circumstances, as I say, of where uh, things are at. Yeah, look, Scotland is also a proud nation. Yes, I think, the oldest international is not a football; it's rugby union, I believe, between Scotland and England. I believe that's the oldest international. Um, I think um, the rivalry between England and Scotland surpasses any other rivalry in international sport. How Scotland have had some really good teams as well, and done so badly at international performance is beyond me. Is beyond me. Do I think Liverpool's decline was expected? Um, that's a difficult one. I think Klopp is under a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure. I think that is an interesting dynamic. I don't. The thing is, obviously, I think much hinges on the FA Cup replay against Wolves. If they lose that at Molineux, the pressure intensifies. That'd be my personal opinion on that situation. Obviously, Liverpool have won a lot of trophies under Klopp, but only one league title. And uh, I think we're in a Klopp has been there a while, and that I think may go in his favour. That the owners have said, "This is our guy. We are sticking with him." On saying that, they have their squad depth, and some of their younger players haven't quite hit their stride. And I don't know with Liverpool. But I think Klopp. I don't think he's going to resign. Let's just say that they'll have to sack him, unless the German national side sack Hansi Flick and go, Jurgen, can we have you please to coach us? Um, okay, so apparently we've hit 1,000 subscribers. So at some point in the next few days, I've got to shave all my hair off. It seems. My neighbour has got some clippers, so we might actually have to get all that shaved off. Any prediction of the nations we will see return at the 2026 World Cup due to the expansion? That could be an interesting one. I think Europe only gets 3 extra teams. Um, the qualification is going to be very, very interesting. Very interesting. The group stage is what concerns me with how they formatted the group stage. The formatting of the group stage is the concern for me because of basically it means there's the possibility for match fixing. There you go. No more hair. Yes, now I've got to see when my neighbour gets back and go to my neighbour Mike. Can you please shave all my hair off, please? Because he wants to shave it off. He's like, no, you've got to get rid of the mullet. And I've been growing my hair for 2.5 years, so this is going to be weird. And tomorrow is going to be really, really cold. So it's going to be like below freezing when I leave for work. So I'm not really looking forward to having no hair when it's like below freezing and it's trying to snow. So it's going to be quite an interesting day tomorrow. Um, Look at the teams that normally miss out or come third or fourth. That is who we'll see in the next World Cup with expanding. Personally, I think countries like Norway, Scotland, Italy, Sweden, Chile, Colombia, Bolivia, that's one that hasn't been there for a while. Honduras return. I think Norway, Sweden have been quite regular at tournaments. Norway haven't been at a tournament for, I think, Euro 2000 was Norway's. I might be mistaken, it might be World Cup 2002, but Norway haven't been at a tournament for a long time. I've got beanies, I don't need any more. Venezuela might actually finally qualify. God, they had a very good youth team. I seem to remember a couple of years ago. In fact, Cuba has never qualified for a World Cup. That is true. That is very, very true. Cuba's more of a baseball country. I know yesterday on yesterday's live stream we ended up discussing, wrestling, pro wrestling, and the issues there. And that got a very interesting side plot. What else? What else did we discuss? Oh yeah, snooker, the corruption in snooker, and the Hearn's involvement in several sports, and how critical I am of Barry and Eddie Hearn, and how I dislike the Hearn dynamic as well. Um, Romania, that's a nation that we haven't seen at a major tournament in 20 odd years. Romania, that would be nice to see Romania back at the top table after a very long absence. Um, they used to have a great team in the 80s and the 90s. Romania, fantastic team. The thing is, with Ireland and the Football Association of Ireland, they have money issues. Um, and this dates back pre-COVID when they rehired Mick McCarthy. COVID caused a few issues, obviously, and of course, Dublin was meant to host some of the Euros matches that we obviously Dublin missed out, and they were scheduled to host matches at the Euros, and that hurt them financially. And then they obviously sacked Mick McCarthy and had to pay him out. All this in a very short space of time. So the FAI, Association of Ireland, has a lot of money issues. A lot of money issues. The women's team is actually starting to do really, really well, which is fantastic. The men's team and the association as a whole is in a lot of trouble. Most nation of heritage, Slovakia, the greatest nation's history, hasn't been seen. No, they were at last year's Euros and got spanked by Spain. Year and a half ago. Northern Ireland, Northern Ireland have definitely overachieved for their population size. Definitely overachieved. And the women obviously qualifying for their first international tournament of women's Euros was fantastic. As again, expanded World Cup, only 3 extra European nations actually get to qualify. So while you're listing all these European nations, only 3 of them get to qualify. Yeah, Wales, I think Gareth Bale's sudden retirement, I think has definitely caused a few issues there with their planning long term, and filling that void. There are some good young Welsh players, coming through in the English league system right now, which is fantastic. But I felt they looked well off the pace at the World Cup. They didn't quite look uh, like they were ready to play tournament football. And we can all argue pros and cons of that, but they 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 didn't look as tuned in as they were the year prior at the Euros. They really looked uh, half a step off. They didn't look right at all. Um, Hungary is an interesting one because they've had the occasional good team in the 80s and the 90s. But again, post communism, post Cold War, a lot of these nations like Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria declined. Well, Bulgaria in '94 were very, very good. So they had their moments. But they had these good, proper players in the 80s and the 90s, and they haven't really replaced them um, since their retirement. Slovakia has performed better than the Czech Republic, yet the Czech Republic claims Czechoslovakia's history. Bulgaria are shocking now, absolutely dross. Stoichkov, yes. Hungary beat England 4-0 and Germany away. Yes, they did. Hungary are still are a decent side. And they're showing signs of again, qualifying for tournaments regularly again. They are showing the signs of taking that next step. Slovenia have had some good players over the years. Right, North Macedonia, formerly known as the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, formerly known as that bit of Yugoslavia near Kosovo. They are decent, but not great. They were between the 30s and 60s. Oh, yeah, no, the Pushkash generation and the mighty Mygars of the 50s, absolutely. They blew that World Cup final in '54 in Bern against the West Germans. The reason why it's now called North Macedonia is the Greeks had a paddy fit for 25 years. There you go. Ukraine, if they still exist with Murdia. I'm not sold on Murdic being worth 100 million, in my opinion. I think Chelsea have mugged themselves off. I think their transfer business has been a bit of a shambles recently. I think the new owner is reacting to inheriting a club that was top four, top six, sacking the incumbent manager, replacing him with a manager from a rival club in the league. That rival club is now doing better. They're doing worse. Todd Bowley is new to football ownership in European football. He's obviously used to Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball has just had a breakdown in the relationship between the players' union and the owners with their lockout a year ago. He's trying to flex his muscles as the new wave of money. So there we go. Yeah, I remember Euro 2004. That was a true underdog win. But as I said, that was a team of players that had a common goal. Whereas Brazil, this World Cup just gone, Belgium, they were a team of individuals who didn't gel well together. Um, that Greek team 2004 was a sum of all its parts, but they knew their role. Otto Rehhagel was a nutty manager, absolutely crazy German, like completely loopy bloke. And if you actually read about Otto Rehhagel, you realise he is completely insane. Um, and they did their thing. Oh yeah, Denmark won the Euros in '92, but they actually had a very good side in the '80s with the Laudrup brothers and Jesper Olsen and all that. And look, they narrowly missed out on qualification. Yugoslavia goes into civil war. UEFA throw Yugoslavia out. They say, Denmark, you were the next best team in that qualification group. You missed out. I think they missed out by a couple of points or a goal difference. They were all on the beach. I think Michael Laudrup was named as national captain by the coach at the time. And the coach phones him up and goes, "Get all the lads together," and they're all on holiday together. And so they all bundle on a plane, and they end up, and they didn't have any, they didn't have any pre-tournament friendlies. They just bundled on a plane, beat the Germans in the final, and the rest is history. Georgia had Ketsbayer as well. Thomas Ketsbayer played for Newcastle. First one I have any memory of was World Cup '94, and I will say this: because I vaguely remember Euro '92. We had just moved back to England from the army base in Germany, so we were settling into our new home. We'd got the TV set up and all that, and it was our first summer in the house. And I remember Euro '92. I remember that vividly because it's your early memories. You actually remember some of your early memories and stuff you when you were 15, 16. I've been knocked out so many times by rugby. I don't really remember most of my teenagers. Um, but World Cup '94 for me, I didn't enjoy. Didn't enjoy it. And as a kid, you're absorbing all this information. You're absorbing everything like a sponge. And World Cup '94 for me was when you're a kid, you want to absorb all that. And looking back at the footage, I prefer Euro '96 and Euro '92 either side. Uh, but a lot of people say World Cup '94 wasn't great. I think it it was a decent tournament for like the US to grow the game. We get the MLS out of it. We get some, some great stories like the Bulgarian story, Henrik Larsson shining, the Norwegians having a good tournament, the Germans losing to Bulgaria, fantastic. We got some great feel good stories out of the tournament, but at the same time, Euro '96 just felt better. France '98 was more memorable. Um, Jamaica qualified in '98. I think we'll find. Trinidad qualified 2006. Um, it was '98. Jamaica qualified. World Cup without England is better than a World Cup without Italy. I'm debating that one. Debating that one. It's not a great look when two of the most historical nations in the history of the game don't qualify. Um, it's impossible for England not to qualify for the Euros now. You say that, but we'll see what happens. A lot hinges on the European qualification process because if that doesn't go well, Southgate's out of the job earlier. To- Togo is one of the worst African nations. Jamaica in the same group as Croatia. I think I can't remember who would Croatia group. Jamaica won a game at the '98 World Cup. I think it was their second game. I can't remember. Was it Scotland? I can't remember who Jamaica in the group. I actually still have my wall chart somewhere. I actually have my wall chart. And in 2002, I got the annual, which had all the nations that had qualified in it for 2002 World Cup as well. Um, Last time Scotland made the World Cup, they got Brazil and Morocco. Yes, they did. '98. Yes, yes. And that was their last tournament before the Euros a year and a half ago. Um, and yeah, Scotland basically young Scottish fans, people younger than me, basically, have grown up with a generation where they've only seen Scotland at one tournament where they were woeful and got a draw 0-0 against England in a bad game. Japan considers the Jamaica loss as one of the most embarrassing defeats in Japanese history. No, I think Hiroshima and Nagasaki is. I shouldn't say that. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, maybe. The surrender in Tokyo Harbour to General MacArthur. Just saying. Japan. Well, no, in sporting wise, it was bad, but there much has changed. Yeah, look, Scotland. I I'm of the opinion that yes, Scotland have massively underachieved. I've also seen Scotland only qualify for 3 tournaments in my lifetime. Um, the problem, I'm Scottish on my father's side, so you can imagine how I feel. Austria had a good team in third. Is yeah, Anschluss, and then the Germans nicked them all. Um, the problem is, there's a generation of sports fans that have seen Scotland be appalling, and they've had some great players play for them. but they have been dreadful. And their rugby team hasn't been much better since '99. There has been a generation of Scottish sports fans that have seen their nation, be it football, rugby league, rugby union, massively underperform, considering they have some very talented individual players who qualify for them, and they have been dreadful. And then player development, so they fail to qualify for a couple of years. They fall short in rugby terms. The Six Nations, they've had a lot of wooden spoons. Football terms, they've only qualified for one tournament in 23 years. Rugby league, they got battered at the last two World Cups, including the one that's just gone. And then you look at the player development of the players coming through, and they're lesser players now than what they were 25 years ago. I remember when North Korea made the 2010 World Cup, their opening game was not televised in North Korea, but they decided to televise the second game where Portugal battered them 7-1. Didn't Brazil beat them like 10-0? Um, uh, Slovakian and Scottish, that's a bit of a Bohemian mix there. North Korea made the quarters in 60. They did make the quarters in 66. Then Eusebio just had the game of his life and scored 4 goals and beat them. Vladimir Smica, very good player. Now Brazil beat them by 8. Maicon had a fantastic goal where he just did something ridiculous from a weird angle. Vladimir Smica was a very, very good player 20 odd years ago. Very good player. Injuries did for Smica, but he was a damn good player. Um, North Korea qualifying was an achievement. Look, according to North Korean propaganda, they won the '66 World Cup and the 2020. Yeah, I know. They really, it's nutty. Um, Yashin, Lev Yashin, is the Yashin Award for the best goalkeeper at a World Cup. So it's the Golden Glove. Really, is the Yashin Award. Lev Yashin was a brilliant goalkeeper. He ended up only having one leg. He died very. He died. I believe was it 89 or 90. He died quite some time ago. But Lev Yashin. Yeah, the 2010 World Cup, I wasn't over enthused with that. And I don't think South Africa were bad hosts, really. South Africa is a sportsman country. Their education system puts a lot of emphasis on sport, much like Australia. There are sports specialist schools. Um, but I think because it was the Southern Hemisphere winter, it did impact the quality of play. The pitches weren't great. But we're at an era of football where goal scoring was on a slight drop, and that suited Spanish tiki taka. And the final was badly refereed by Howard Webb, so there is that. The Vuvu, yes, the Vuvuzela. We'll move on from that. Diego Forlan was at his peak. So we'll get on with that. Who's better, Maradona, Pele, Ronaldo, and Messi? Look, Pele. You have to remember, at the time Pele's playing, South American players, in reality, weren't really allowed to play in Europe. Let that sink in because of the military regimes and the Cold War, and and the military regimes of South America being right wing, and a lot of centre left socialist governments in Western Europe. The Cold War, the political situation, it was very rare for a South American to go over to Europe. Di Stefano is one of the few South American born players. He's slightly older than he's a bit older than Pele. Went over to Real Madrid. And that was because Franco's government was also a right-wing fascist government, and that was allowed. Pele played his entire professional career, apart from his spell at the New York Cosmos, at Santos. Maradona and Messi obviously go to Europe, and that's different. And the eras are different. Maradona, while he was a brilliant, skillful player, scores less goals than you think, and off the field, well, was all over the place. Messi, yeah, he's won everything in the game. But Pele's got the best record in World Cup finals, where every World Cup final he's played in, he's won. That's what I'm going to say on that one. I would say Pele's still better. Um, do you think the East Germans still look out for East German players? Di Stefano was an Argentine, yes, but he also then qualified for Spain. There was a political deal done there. East Germany was trouble at World Cups, but they beat West Germany in '74 with Spar Basser, scoring the only goal of the game. Thank you very much. Uh, More Slovaks than Czechs are part of the Czechoslovak teams. Again, that whole the Pushkash award and the Panenka penalty and all that. It's an interesting one, and the politics behind it's all really weird. On the 2010 World Cup game, there was an option for me to turn off the Vuvuzelas. Yes, I do believe BBC and the Red Button were receiving so many complaints via Ofcom about the noise because some of the elderly people, thought there was actually something wrong with their TVs. But they put an option where they could mute you could mute the crowd noise and just commentary. Germany's been horrendous since 2014. Well, out of the last 3 tournaments now. Oliver Bierhoff, who was put in charge of the federation and development pathways, he's now gone. He's been the scapegoat. So Hansi Flick is still in charge of the German national side. Oliver Bierhoff, who was part of Klinsmann's backroom staff and Jogi Löw's backroom staff, he got put in a position where he was the face of the German federation. And he's the full guy for the last couple of bad tournaments. So there is that. But no, Germany and Italy have been all over the place in the last decade and a bit. And there are multiple reasons for that. Yet Germany win a World Cup, Italy win a Euros, and now they're all over the place. So they're in a real crossroads and a flux. It's all over the place. Greatest British player of all time. Well, Stanley Matthews has to be in there, but Jimmy Armfield. You've got Greavesy, the Charlton brothers, Hurst, really good. George Best has to be mentioned, I think. There are some really good players in there. Bale wins in his Champions Leagues with the team around him win them, and he had a couple of good performances in a couple of finals. Gareth Bale is an enigma and he's a divisive debating point. I'm disappointed with the TV pitch for the next round of the FA Cup. I think Stevenage should have been a televised game against Stoke. No, I don't think so. That's 2 lower league clubs because Stoke aren't a Premier League club at the moment. Let's get the replays out the way first because we've got the Wolves, Liverpool, Leeds, Cardiff, and a few other replays to get out the way first. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some games on the Red Button that aren't on the main TV channels, such as on BBC Red Button and things like that. I can understand the Stevenage side of things. They've beaten Aston Villa, but we'll see. Klopp moaning about replay. That when you're hearing a manager complain about stuff, manager under pressure. However, the debate on replays, and I do get this, the response to that is win on the night. I think, oh no, replays will be gone long before then. I think this is the last year. I was saying it last year as well. I seem to remember, was this the last time we'll see replays? COVID has sped up the decline of the FA Cup replay, but I remember when the FA Cup final went to replay. It's happening in my lifetime with Palace Arsenal, but actually was still technically able to go to a replay until I think 1995, 96, and they changed it, even though it didn't go to a replay again. I remember the 99 semi-final replay between Arsenal and Manchester United, the Ryan Giggs goal, when they were down to 10 men. Not long after that, the semi-final replay was scrapped. Then the quarter-final replay was scrapped. And they've been going through the rounds slowly but surely. Last year, the third round didn't have a replay. It was up to the second round. This year, they brought the third round replay back. So, but the FA, Premier League, and Football League had an extraordinary meeting because UEFA had changed the format of the Champions League and the other European competitions. And so we may see replays go all together. We may see the two-legged semi-finals in the League Cup go all together. And then going forward, we'll see what happens. Bale, Lewandowski, best where Haaland, Kavicka, Alaba have really suffered in terms of international football to their countries. Um, Indonesia and Philippines are trying to host the tournament. That's not going to happen. There's too much instability in the region. I don't like how the FA Cup is formatted. I do deal with it. It's always been formatted that way. The bigger clubs join in the third round. Maybe that changes, and the big clubs join from the first round proper. So we could see massive change in a year or two's time. But I think replays are done. I think the big clubs join earlier. Replays are scrapped, and we'll go from there. That might be the way they have to format it. Possibly, they might change how the League Cups formatted as well. I think smaller, lower league clubs are going to suffer unless they've got a wealthy owner who's willing to back them and cover the loss in revenue. I do believe from League One downwards, they're going to have a hit and they need to be compensated for that. Under the current arrangement, the replays really benefit them. But I think on the data, they're actually going to look at the historical data, how many of the third tier and below get past the third or fourth round and go deep into the competition. They're going to look at that and go, okay, how many lower league and non-league clubs really make it into the latter stages of the FA Cup these days, and adjust accordingly. But there is pressure on getting the financial balance right. Will we ever see India at a World Cup? What, football? Thing is, India is cricket and field hockey, man. So they really, on the amateur side of things, in the centre, they really follow the field hockey, the World Cup and the Olympics. They don't have it. It's a national sport. Played at all the schools, everything. Cricket, they're one of the world's best. In regards to football, massive fan base, 1.3 billion people. Big TV deals will eventually get signed if the BCCI are happy with sharing TV revenue for sport with football. Obviously, Blackburn are owned by the Venkies, which are an Indian family. So there is Indian money in English football anyway. There is clearly an interest. There's a big expat Indian community here with a big Indian subcontinental community of Sikhs, Hindus, Muslims, and Christians, and Buddhists throughout the UK. I mean, look, Glasgow is the home of the chicken tikka masala and the chicken korma. No, that's not kidding. Birmingham is Balti capital of England, so there is a cultural influence in the Midlands, like places like Leicester and Birmingham, towns like Slough got big Indian populations. There's big Indian populations. Glasgow's got a massive subcontinent. There's already a big subcontinental Asian population here. And you've got those famous Indian Sikh fans of Man United who all sit near the bench. About 12 of them, all family related, all cousins, and they all sit near, and then they're very proud. There's a big Indian community in Salford. And of course, they will communicate with their relatives back home in India or Pakistan or Bangladesh and things like that. So there is the fan base there. It's the player base that's the problem, and getting the quality of players and the clubs up to a standard which then develops players. Because I've had this debate before, and I do honestly believe that subcontinental Asians, so Indians, Bengalis, Pakistanis, Bengalis, obviously Bangladesh, historically Sri Lankans, they're more interested in cricket. It's a cultural thing. And so it will be interesting to see where they. And I had this debate, and this guy was saying that football is geared against the Asian community. Da, da, da. And I was like, where's the interest? You tell me where you see Indian or Pakistani or Bangladeshi kids playing football in the park. You don't. You do, but you don't in the numbers of the Afro-Caribbean community or the Oriental community or the Caucasian community, the European community. You don't. They're playing cricket because that's what they've been brought up around. Their families are cricket mad. So there you go. Why FA Cup attendance is generally so bad? Ticket price. Um, League ticket price is capped. Cup prices aren't. Doesn't matter what cup competition. It could be Champions League, Football League Cup. It could be Football League Trophy, whatever, FA Cup. Doesn't matter. The only ticket prices that are capped are away prices for league, and I think actual league home prices as well are capped. All cup competitions, be it domestic or European, uncapped ticket price, home or away. There's your answer. The clubs are trying to maximise the revenue, and people are staying at home because they haven't got the disposable income. There's your answer to the FA Cup attendance has been shit. Same with League Cup for years. The League Cup for years has had no attendance, pretty much. Done. Cricket's dead sport now. I wouldn't say it's a dead sport. It's at a crossroads, and it needs to figure out the direction it's going to take for its long-term stability, survival, and good health. I care for cricket, and I'm under the age of 45 and 33. Hi. We exist. Young cricket fans exist. We just are pissed off with the direction cricket's taking with the ECB, the ICC, Cricket Australia, the BCCI, that kind of thing. There is definitely a frustration, is a good way to look at it, with the cricketing authorities and the direction they've taken the sport over the last 18 years. But yes, I'm under the age of 45 and I'm a cricket fan, and I'm really frustrated with the sport's governance, not the players. It's not the players. I like T20. I like one day cricket. I like Test cricket. I like the three big formats. I don't like the 100. I think it's a pointless format we don't need. The TV deal that we have hampers, not helps the game. And the, the the governance side of it is a shambles. And there's enough documentaries out there that prove that the governance side of it, there's corruption there, and then the sport is very open to match and spot fixing, as we saw with the Pakistan spot fixing scandal, the Hansi Kronia scandal, the Srisanth betting scandal, where he goes to prison, and there's all sorts. In the old days, pre-Sky, no one really bought a season ticket. The FA Cup became one game most fans went to. Better in the Cup than League for some. Do I think Man City sack Pep? I think Guardiola might be hinting at he's not. I think he looks like he's resigned to the fact they're going to win no silverware this season. I don't know. I'll be surprised to see what happens. Um, the one competition other than the Premier League they've dominated is the League Cup, and they're not going to win that. So I think, I don't know with Pep. He's always hinted at possibly an attempt at international management. Now, international management is completely different because instead of like getting a transfer target, or I've got my squad week in, week out, I want to add a couple of players. You're limited by your player pool of eligibility. I don't think they win the Champions League either. I think they could have a trophy this season, and then we'll see what Sheikh Mansour and his minions will do. And I think it'll be the first trophy this season since Pep took over. So we'll see what happens. I think this is also his longest spell in charge of a club as well, and he's one of those guys. Other than Barcelona, he hasn't actually done much. Bayern at the time were playing in a league where the nearest team were 25 points behind them. Who's more likely to win the Champions League first, PSG or Man City? You've got to build a culture, and neither side have actually got the right culture. There you go. Neither side's got the right culture. They just spend money, bring players in. They're not developing enough players internally. That's how you build culture. You develop your players internally, a core, and then you add to the core. Where you bring that player in, you bring this veteran in, or that talent in. They're not developing enough players through their youth systems. But their youth systems are actually designed to be tax write-offs. Funny that, isn't it? And PR stunts, really, because they're not developing enough youth talent for the amount of money they've invested. Where's the youth talent? handful of Man City players have made it, and I think one or two PSG players have come through their system, but not a lot. Where is the youth talent coming through? Where's the academy product? Foden is what, one of a handful? But that's the problem. That's why we have this unbalanced transfer market, and the most successful clubs historically, a lot of their players came through their youth system. Man United, while they had a very just disordered, chaotic decade, over 50% of the players who ever played for the club, including the Newton Heath days, came through their youth system, were local juniors. Um, and Mbappe wasn't really originally, he's not from Paris originally, he's from the south of France, so I let that sink in. But yeah, how many PSG youth players are really making first in football? When you've got unlimited untapped wealth, and you can just go, here's a £250 million for a player, have them, and when this is the problem, because it takes time to develop youth talent through the levels. That's actually a more investment than a one-off. It's actually cheaper, but you've got to keep investing every year. Oh, we'll just get some right. How big is North London Derby today in terms of the league? Arsenal are looking favourites to win the league, so and Tottenham claim they're a Big Six club, haven't won a trophy since 2008, haven't won the league since the 60s. So it means a lot. Qatar realise money doesn't equal winnings. True. They they bought the French league for eternity, and then they can't win that every year. Now the two smallest clubs in London. No. You forgot the crazy gang of Watford, Wimbledon. Would you say AFC Wimbledon have a bigger fan base than Tottenham? That'd be interesting. That'd be fantastic. Qatar is the worst record of a host nation at a World Cup, not the worst record of a nation at a World Cup. Although not far off it, they were poor. I wouldn't say, as I said last night, and as I've been saying for quite some time, you've got the ultra negative anti-Qatar World Cup, the ultra, it was fantastic. I'm in the middle. I don't buy in the propaganda. There were some things that went wrong at the World Cup, and there were some things that went very, very right. And I still have my concerns about FIFA and the direction they're taking the international game forward. Fun fact, only 300,000 of Qatar's student population is actually Qatari. Yeah, we know that. Rest of the migrant workers and retirees, yes, we know that. Very sparsely populated until they won the World Cup. Their population was about 1 million. They've trebled their population and are still less than 3 million. There you go. They have to import people to keep the economy going. Yes, we're going to have one of major. Wigan and Birmingham City have won silverware more recently than Spurs. Yes, this is true. This is true, and both of them got relegated in the same seasons they won silverware. Birmingham City got relegated after winning the League Cup against Arsenal, and Wigan got relegated after winning the FA Cup against Man City. That's a fun fact as well. No, we were obviously the. I just don't have a trophy. Well, you've got bragging rights saying we're more successful than you in the last insert period of time. Or Wigan can say we've never lost a cup final, there you go, because they haven't. And Birmingham have actually got more trophies than Tottenham since Tottenham last won the league. All of that is a burn. That is actually true. Birmingham have actually got more trophies since, because they've actually got a load of League Cups, and I forgot about that. Birmingham have actually got more trophies than Tottenham have since they last won the league. That is mad. Look at the club histories; it will make sense. Spurs, they've had some. Look, this is what I find really frustrating about Tottenham Hotspur. They've had some world-class players play for them. Still can't win silverware, and this is the problem: is the culture at the club, because they've got something has gone wrong with that team. Yes, Leicester has more trophies. That is true. Yes, Leicester actually do have more trophies since Spurs last won the league. Yes, they've won quite a bit. Spurs were the classic Southern fancy Dans. They preferred to win cups than leagues. Burnley are well, Burnley couldn't win cups or leagues either. They've got the same amount of league titles as each other. And I actually think Burnley, no, Spurs do have more trophies than a lot of clubs. It is true. They've only won the league twice and they haven't won a trophy in 13, 14 years or something. And it is becoming a bit of a running joke. And Hugo Lloris has lost every major. He has won a World Cup. He's lost everything else, but he has won a World. I think he's won a league as well. I think was it Montpellier or Marseille? He won the league, so he's won a league title somewhere, just not in the Premier League. Um, Hugo Lloris, he's a decent goalkeeper. I don't think he's a class goalkeeper. Yeah, of course we do. We do. Thank you. Um, I appreciate that. We beat Spurs in the cup final as well. I seem to remember in my lifetime. Get in. Yeah, we do. It's fact. Um, I mean, admittedly, we only have one more league trophy than Spurs, but we're not as successful in the cup competition. Although I'm saying that, I think we're not far behind Spurs when it comes to the FA Cup. We've only won the one League Cup, so there is that. But I don't think we're that far behind Spurs when it comes to the FA Cup either. Will it ever change? I think a lot of the culture comes from the top, and that is the ownership and the board and the chairman Daniel Levy. I think that's where the issue really lies. Is it that just Spurs have a very big fan base, top dozen in the country, so there's potential Southern fans have more disposable cash? You would think that. Um, you would think every fan south of Birmingham would have more money than a fan north, but that is not necessarily the case. There are some areas in the south, and I live in the south, where there is deprivation and there is a lack. I mean, I don't have the disposable cash to go to even watch Reading play. I mean, I could have watched the Reading Blackburn game over the season. I don't have the disposable cash for that. And yeah, you could argue, yes, we might have a slightly higher house price or average wage, but there are some areas in the home counties and on the south coast that are really poor. Um, some of the most deprived areas in the UK are in the south. Um, like the southwest is a very deprived area. Yeah, they don't have a lot of clubs, but so that kind of north-south divide is actually a flawed logic, in my opinion. Surveys can be twisted to suit a certain narrative. Um, the southwest on a sporting front, I think, is the weakest area of the UK. In my opinion, maybe north central Wales as well. But it is what it is. On average, yes, Southern fans do have a bit more disposable income because wages are generally higher in the southeast than anywhere else outside of London. I accept that, but there are some areas in the south of England that, and in central Wales that are really, really poor. Um, yeah, Leeds do have a massive fan base. They do travel well. Leeds is a sportsman city. Um, Everton have a sizable fan base. They are a club in crisis. They are. And I don't want this to be a purely football chat, but they are in trouble. Um, but it's like, and I will say other sports. There are some. I mean, what was I watching? I was watching something. They're like the South Sydney Rabbitohs, for example, in Australia, the rugby league, biggest fan base, biggest fan base. There are South Sydney fans all over the world. You will see a South Sydney Rabbitohs jersey at almost any sporting or public event. There'll be one guy just out of nowhere. It's become a fashion statement. It's like the New York Yankees, global brands. Yeah, there's always the random South guy. And there was a period where they were kicked out of the competition and their future was uncertain about 25 years ago. Russell Crowe comes along, and then you have that Hollywood connection. And obviously, they've won a competition in that time, but you will have, yeah, the random South guy. It's a thing. It's like you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs. They haven't won a title of even a President's Trophy or division title since 1967. They have not won in the play. They've not won a Stanley Cup since 1967. They can't get out the first round since I think is it 2012 or 2013? A decade they've been stuck getting out the first round. Um, so there you go. The biggest club in Super League is Wigan. Biggest club globally, I would say for fan base or just biggest club. I would say is probably the Broncos, Brisbane. The Broncos, maybe Souths. Um, Wigan in Super League, yes, but on a wider global, yeah, they might be the most successful club historically with all the silverware, but on a global scale, Wigan is actually a very, very small um, regional town um, in a very congested sports market. Brisbane is one town team, really. You've got a couple of teams in other sports, but Brisbane is Broncos country, and then you've got the wider surrounding area. Um, Big Six plus Aston Villa, Everton, Newcastle, Leeds, West Ham, maybe Sunderland or Wolves next. Um, I think any club that's a founding member of the Football League will have a massive fan base. I would say Newcastle probably actually has a bigger fan base than Spurs and Arsenal. The whole city turns up. Um, yeah, no, in terms of silverware, yes, we can do have the silverware, but in terms of actual fan base, on if you're trying to sell the game globally, I think you'll find it's the Brisbane Broncos or the Canberra Raiders. They're more iconic kind of branding, the way that their rivalry in the 90s. Most fans in rugby league, it's either Broncos or Bunnies. I wouldn't go that far. I would just say the Bunnies. There's always random South guy, and it's become kind of an unofficial marketing point. And when you're trying to sell the game to North America, um, you go. Biggest club not to have won the league: Birmingham City, Borough, Cardiff, West Ham. Biggest team not to win the league. It's a difficult one. That is a difficult one. That's a really hard one, actually. I would have to go Birmingham City for the fan base. I would say Birmingham City because of the population size and the catchment area. Rabbitohs have the most or second most social media followers, like something like that. They have a ridiculous amount of success historically, and the Russell Crowe effect, having a famous big name owner who's a marketable figure in his own right, outside of your home demographic, will do that. It's like Ryan Reynolds buying into Wrexham. Wrexham suddenly have got this global following now because of Ryan Reynolds and Jake McElhenney, the two actors who bought Wrexham Football Club. And that then increases the profile of your brand. Now, Wrexham are still in the non-league. They have a very good chance of getting out of the non-league, but suddenly they've now got a bigger following globally. And so the Russell Crowe effect, I think, has helped with the growth of the South Sydney brand outside of Australia and outside of the south side of Botany Bay. West Ham, me too, they're taking off now. Next Dan will be mega rich. Nottingham Forest has more Champions League. No, don't. They've only got the two. Liverpool got more than that. You're surprised West Ham. I am a bit surprised to a certain extent, but then I'm not because there are other London clubs that have failed to kick on when they've got a few cup trophies or a good cup run, and have failed to take that next step. I think Charlton's another one that has didn't take that next step. Palace, I think, haven't won anything. QPR have only got the one League Cup. I think finished second one season. So some of the other London clubs really did fail to take that next step and win that first league title. A Romanian club won the that was Steaua Bucharest. Will Preston or Huddersfield win silverware again? Um, that is a good question. Um, I think the goal for those clubs is to get back in the Premier League. I think would be the objective, or in Preston's case, get back in the top flight. They haven't been there for a very long time. I think that's the objective. Um, I think it's a difficult. Again, that's a difficult one to answer. Both clubs haven't been successful for a very long time, and then you have to look at the reasons why the success suddenly stopped. In Huddersfield's case, Arsenal with their manager. In Preston's case, um, it was in the early days of the football league, and then other clubs were like, okay, well, what's working for them work for us. Hadji, yeah, he played for. I think it was he played for Galatasaray for the end of his career. Yeah, no, West Ham have never been outside the top two divisions. Neither have Everton. So, and they're both in the relegation zone now. So that is something that, for most of Everton's existence, they've been a top flight club. For the majority of West Ham, they've been a top flight club. So both clubs have actually had some of the longest percentage of existence in the top flight. Yes, that is correct. No, Liverpool, Man United have also been relegated out of the top flight. Arsenal have been outside the top flight. Um, I don't think they've been down to the third tier, but they've had longer spells out of the top flight than Everton have. Um, I think every club has been outside the top flight at least for a season in their history. So, and I think Everton's case, I think it's 5 seasons in total they've been outside the top division. We shall see what happens in the second half of this season with Everton. I think they really are in trouble. Arsenal was in a bit of a sticky spell with Unai Emery for a little bit, and then Arteta comes along, and the rest is the rest is history. And I think giving Arteta time was the right idea from the ownership. He's won them an FA Cup. He's top of the league right now and could bring their first league title in over 15 years. So let's see what, um, well, nearly 20 years actually. But let's see what Arteta does. Um, Greatest Eastern European player of all time. Boniek, Poland. Pushkash for Hungary. Panenka um, for Czechoslovakia. Stoichkov for Bulgaria. Hadji or Dan Petrescu for Romania. There are some good ones. There are some good ones. For me, I think Karel Porsky and Pavel Nedved for the Czech Republic in the 90s, or Davor Shuker. That's more Central Europe. Um, yeah, I think leaving Highbury hampered Arsenal because they couldn't spend money for a while. They were reduced spending in the transfer market on players, and some of their signings were absolutely appalling. And that has to lie with Wenger because he had a very strong say on transfer policy and scouting, and it didn't work. And then suddenly he wins them an FA Cup, and all is forgiven. And then, Emery wins them an FA Cup and gets them to the European final. And then Arteta wins them an. They've won some silverware since being at the Emirates, but unfortunately, since 2006, they've won 3 trophies. And I don't know what it is, but the Emirates doesn't really truly feel like the same kind of intimidating atmosphere as Highbury was. Highbury was an intimidating stadium to play at because you were closer to the pitch. Um, it was on the smaller side, yes. It was a more tight-fitting ground. It was basically a big version of Loftus Road, where you're literally very, very close, very, very close, very intimidating. Yes, yes. Sheffield Wednesday are the only but it was the Wednesday Cricket Club, and they're an offshoot. And but yes, George Ware. So I'm going to say yes, yes for Suka, yes for Sheffield Wednesday, and George Ware. Only African players with the Ballon d'Or. Better than Simon Eto. So George Ware, for me. Um, and his son plays for the US. So because every Liberian citizen is also eligible to be a citizen of the US because of their historical links since the Monroe presidency. So there you go. Samuel Eto'o, great player, as an administrator, crook. It's been there's allegations against him of corruption that are pretty close to on the money. Drogba, not the same level as George Ware, in my opinion. Not the same level. Just not even close. Um, but that's my opinion on yes, Drogba was a fantastic player, but he was playing at a very dominant side. But he was fantastic in France before he came over to Chelsea. Was our Didier. Who's the greatest Asian player? That's a difficult one, but I would probably go for Keizuki Honda of Japan. There you go. I don't think Jason Park or Son Heung-min are on the same level yet. Um, but as I say, the that's a difficult one because really, yes, Grobbelaar is technically Zimbabwean, Rhodesian, yes. Bruce Grobbelaar, yes, he's African, yes. You could argue Quinton Fortune and Benny McCarthy from South Africa and Lucas Radebe. Oh God, we are going back in time now, aren't we? You had Mido from Egypt, played for Spurs. Mido, what a player. God, we are going back in time a bit here, aren't we? Roger Miller, the greatest Central North African player. God. So now we're getting into ridiculous territory now where I've got to remember like every African Cup of Nations for the last like 30 years, and that's just ridiculous. But you've got Carney, you've got JJ Okocha, Roger Miller, Rigobert Song, you've got Mido, you've got Mahrez, he's technically is he Algerian or Moroccan? There are some good players. Oh, and then you've got greatest Central Americans. Oh God, Pala one shot. Oh, I'm gonna get another snack and a drink. I'll be back in a second. Oh, Chikorito or his father. There you go. There's one. Right, we're back. Greatest Oceania player, Mark Paducah, or Harry Kewell? There's debate on that one. I had to have a break. I had to have a Kit Kat. Someone Australian. Well, technically, Christian Vieri was actually brought up in Australia. So there you go. No, not Tim Cahill for me. Technically, you could actually say Christian Vieri because he was brought up in Australia and he was born there. But you've got Harry Kewell and Mark Paducah, I think, were better than Tim Cahill. Although, obviously, Tim Cahill had a very good career at Everton, he also was instrumental in getting Millwall to an FA Cup final. Henrik Larsson. Now, bearing in mind, my answers are subjective, but I'm going for Henrik Larsson or Eirik Bakke of Norway. Hmm. Yeah, Lindbergh, good player, good player. You had Edstrom of the 70s, another good player. You had Sand, Denmark. Those are good players, but I would go for Henrik Larsson. Or Thomas Carew, there's another good player. Yes, Craig Johnston. Yes, yes. I've seen an interview with Craig Johnston as well. He's the guy who developed the Predator boot in the 90s for Adidas. Craig Johnston. He's the reason why we have the Predators in Adidas. And very good player. Nutter, but very good player. Yeah, there's a very good interview of him on the Matty Johns podcast from 2019. About an hour and a half long. And he discusses how he starts off at Borough, ends up at Liverpool, and then after retiring, he designed via several bankruptcies the Predator boot, the first Predator boots of the 90s that obviously David Beckham and some other high-profile players like Johnny Wilson, the rugby Predators, and all that, and Dan Carter helped keep Adidas from going bankrupt because Adidas at the time used to have the leaf symbol, and now they have the foot symbol, as I call it, the three stripes rather than the cannabis leaf symbol. And it's at that time Adidas were in the midst of doing their rebranding, and they're basically bankrupt. And he comes in with this design, and they put all their eggs in the basket for the Predators, and the rest is history. Yeah, but that's the retro design. That's not their main logo anymore. The main logo is now the Adidas, what I call the shoe stripe, the three stripes of like the small, medium, and large. The leaf design is for their retro, non-sporting line of clothing. I think you'll find. Although I do have a pair of Adidas shoes that have the leaf design on them. I've got my Adidas tracksuit which has the stripe design, but the leaf design is not now their major logo. It's their secondary corporate logo. That's obviously the leaf design is the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, and then the mid 90s they went for the change because they wanted to rebrand because the company was really in a financial. Got any what fleeces? What fleeces do I have? So I have a lot of Reebok, Adidas, Puma, Nike. I have some Alessi somewhere. I did. I'm more of a hoodie type guy in trackies. So at the moment, I wear my Puma. And here's the thing about Puma and Adidas: they were set up by rival brothers in Bavaria, and one side of the road in the village is the Adidas headquarters and factory, the Hasler family, and the other side of the road has the Puma headquarters and factory. And the village is only about like 2,000 people in Bavaria. And half the village work for Adidas, and half the village work for Puma, and then about 5 or 6 people work for local Audi or petrol station or something. It really is bizarre. Really is bizarre. Um, yeah, I'm not really a fleece guy. I'm more of a hoodie kind of guy. I'm not really a fan of. To be fair, the only Nike products I actually like are their Air Maxes. I'm not a massive fan of their football kit designs. I'm not a fan of their ice hockey designs. for the national jerseys for the double IHF. I'm not a fan of their rugby union kits. I never have been. I never was since the 2000s when they did France and England with the skin tights. Didn't like them. And don't get me wrong, I like some of their trackies and I like some of their hoodies and I like some of I like their Air Max range because they've got the Gore-Tex Air Max range. So the next pair of Air Maxes I'm getting could be the Gore-Tex pair, which are really nice because they're waterproof and they're more comfortable to wear. Other than that, I'm not a fan of their sports kits. Their designs, they just look really like a 16-year-old with word art has designed them for an art project or a tech project. They don't look very nice. They look a bit cheap. And but then again, Puma have made some missteps in the last decade and a half with some of their designs. But I'm a big fan of Puma football boots. I like the Puma football boot design. But I do think some of the sports designs for kits leave a lot to be desired. Now, I'm a big fan of what Adidas have done with the NHL. I am surprised they're not renewing their contract in 2024, next year. Sales have been fantastic. The reverse retros, okay, there's been some misses there, but fantastic. Now, I don't know who comes in to replace Adidas with the NHL. I'm not a fan of them. I mean, the Nike tick on my Air Maxes, I've got two different pairs of Air Maxes right now, and I've got a third pair of Nike, the Nike Stalkers, which are like the level below Air Max. And the tick on all three is different. So my Air Maxes from 5 years ago, the tick is slightly different than my Air Maxes that I bought a month ago. And my Nike Stalkers, which are even older than the two pairs of Air Maxes, the tick's different on them. The tick on my hoodie is different to the trainers. The tick on my trackies is different. Both pairs of trackies is different. And it's all a bit mad. And so I don't know that to me, the bubble, the Nike Air Max 90 football boot style, with the Tempo 90s and all that, I've never liked them. I don't like their football kits. I don't like their. I like some of their fashion lines clothing. I do, but I just don't know. But Nike owns oh, Bauer, who's an ice hockey manufacturer. Adidas owns Reebok, which is interesting. And what we're seeing is Nike now has the NFL. Reebok had the NHL and the NFL at one point. Adidas comes in with basically with the parent company, so the design doesn't really change. And they're now not renewing. Now, so there's some interesting things there. I wouldn't say Reebok's for middle-aged dads. I just think Reebok, unfortunately, some of their designs are crap. I'm sorry. I liked their NHL, some of their NHL designs, but some of them didn't work. And Reebok hasn't really been a top level. And because Adidas basically saved Reebok from going bust, I don't know. Fila are still going. I only bought some Fila stuff the other day, but I've got some Fila stuff, which I wear. But again, Fila's gone through a weird rebrand, and I don't think the quality of their product is as good as what it was 5, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So there is certain aspects. I think certain companies have definitely got their style wrong and their branding wrong, and it's tough because I like what football boots did I have when I was at school? I had a Diodora. I like my Diodora. I like my Lotto. I like my Kappa. Fortunately, the direction they've taken is they've got a smaller market share now than what they did in the 90s. And when we come to who sponsors who, when it comes to kit manufacturer, that Man City kit last season that Puma made with the word mark, Oh my god! And they did it for all the puke kits. I think they got some feedback from that saying, "Don't do that again." I think they got some feedback on social media saying, "Don't do that again." Wasn't very good. They were hideous, and I don't even think because ugly jerseys can be collectible. They're not collectible. You wouldn't want to collect them. They're not. They did not sell well, so you can get them cheap, not collectible whatsoever. Um, but I think yeah, some companies, for me at least, I'm not a fan of Under Armour. I never have been. Never have been a fan of Under Armour. Um, that's what I call middle-aged mum jogger clothing. Um, Umbro's owned by Nike. Um, the Canterbury rugby brand, which normally makes rugby union stuff, they're basically bankrupt. ISC, who make rugby league stuff, and X Blades, who make rugby league boots, they don't have a big market share. Asics and oh, what's the Japanese one? There's a Japanese Azure or whatever it is. Um, Mizano. Well, there's a Japanese one. They again limited um, market share because Adidas and Nike, the two big ones. Oh, Umbro still exists. It's just owned by Nike. There was a period when Nike dropped the brand and then regretted it because they actually saw their sales in Europe drop massively. And they realised it was actually quite. I mean, I've got some Umbro stuff. I hate to admit that, I do. But Umbro isn't a good quality brand. Hasn't been for a long time. There are some good. I think Umbro is now no longer under Nike. I think Nike sold it off, spun it off, make some money. But basically, the sports clothing market, Adidas and Nike are the big ones, but there are some good niche ones as well. The problem is getting that big sponsorship deal with a big sports team or sports league. And I remember got the Castore, which I think a couple of clubs have got the Castore sponsorship, like Newcastle. The Sydney Roosters have Castore as well. Not a fan of their kits. That's just personal. It's just how they design the striping and how they design the blending of colours. I'm not saying they're bad kits. I just personally find them a little bit okay. How they design that doesn't work for me. Um, but there's some of these newer brands like Under Armour, for example, and Warrior and Castore that are just slipping into the market, and they're getting that first real big sponsorship deal or marketing deal with a sports team or a league or a couple of teams, and it gets them in the door. Um, Now, it's when they get a deal for a national side, an international team, which is playing at a World Cup or a major international world championships or a big international tournament. Suddenly, that will challenge Nike and Adidas because Nike and Adidas at their various points have had money issues. Nike haven't always been, profitable. Adidas 30 years ago were on their knees, basically bankrupt, rebranded themselves. Yes, they brought back the Leaf logo for some of their products, but it's not their main corporate logo. Reebok has been bought out by Adidas. Lonsdale isn't around anymore, I think. No, it still is. I've got some Lonsdale gear. It's owned by Mike Ashley. Same with Slazenger. They're part of Mike Ashley's ownership group now. Um, Slazenger and Lonsdale still exist. Um, they do, but Everlast. Yep, there was another one. There's been quite a few that have been flash in the pan, and again, it's getting that sponsorship deal with a football club, a rugby league club, an international team. It's like Admiral used to make cricket kits. They make cricket kits. Why do Coventry City have an elephant in their badge? That is a very good question. I've never thought of that. I think I'll find out why. There has to be a community link. Now, Coventry is obviously famous for the Lady Godiva story, where the local lords owed money to hire like the king or something for the city's taxes or the town's taxes, and to avoid paying the taxes, Lady Godiva just went naked down the road on the back of a horse. So there's local legends like that, which would then link into a sports crest where you have that link to the community. Why they have an elephant, I don't know. It's got to be something to do with the medieval period. It has to be, because I know lots of kings and princes had menageries where they had these exotic gifts given to them by foreign envoys. Would go, look, the Venetian ambassador has given us a pelican, and it is a known fact that I think Henry III had lions in the Tower of London as part of the royal collection. Wouldn't surprise me if there was something to do with. I'll have to look into that. Why the crest is the way it is. I could not tell you off the top of my head. I do work with a Coventry City fan, so I could ask him. And he is from Coventry. He's a diehard Coventry City fan from before they won the FA Cup in '87. He's that old. I will have to ask my work colleague. He is a Coventry fan. Why? I was because it's the medieval coat of arms of England is three lines of the Plantagenet dynasty. That's it. Before then, it was two lions or one lion of the Dukes of Normandy, the Plantagenets of the Dukes of Anjou. Oh, you're making me do history video content again. It's a historical thing to do with the coat of arms of the King of England and the Dukes of Anjou and the Dukes of Normandy. And the ruling houses had the lion or panther or leopard, technically, depends on how you break it down. Just like Scotland has a lion as well on some of their heraldry. It's basically with what you would have on your shield in battle, and your men would have your colours. Watch Game of Thrones, for Christ's sake, or any other medieval sort of Kingdom of Heaven. You'll see like a knight would have his coat of arms, all the men at arms and his foot men at arms and dismounted would have the knight's colours. And that's how it goes. Serie A wearing the pink. That's the referees, isn't it? You've got the Gazette dello Sport, which is the pink newspaper, which is one of the best sports publications in the world. Makes L'Equipe look like crap. Where do I find your history channel? I'm a bit dopey with tech stuff. It's just the history boffin. Just put at history boffin, at the history boffin, and it's the other channel. It's just the history boffin. It should have about 70 subscribers. I was doing all the kings and queens of England, and I got to, I think, Henry III or Richard the Lionheart, Edward the First, and I've got to do Edward the Second and the poker up the bum, and then I've got to do Edward the Third and 100 Years' War, and I got a bit sidetracked. Yeah, I've got to go ask my neighbour when he's back from work. Can I borrow your clippers and shave all my hair and beard off, please? Because I've got to go to work. I'm going to scare the shit out of my work colleagues. It's so much fun. Yeah, it's just the history boffin is the other channel. Not as much content on there, although I've got to do a little bit more content in the coming days and weeks. I think I've got some good video ideas. I'm reading a very good book right now on the period of the English Civil War and just before and just after. So really interesting. James the First or James the Sixth, I think, of Scotland. James the First of England. Not a lot of stuff is written about that period after the Spanish Armada before Charles I. Not a lot, but this is fantastic. Lots of death and death. So that's kind of interesting. I'm just going for a skinhead. I'm just shaving it all off. It's all coming off. Grade 1, all even all over, and then we'll start growing it again. So there's that. But yeah, we've hit 1,000 subs. My neighbour knows when it hits 1,000 subs to charge the clippers up, and I'll take my vacuum cleaner over because I'm not going to ask him to hoover up my fur. Hoover it all up, shave the beard off, and go from there. It's going to be weird having no hair because I've had long hair now for a year and a half. It's going to be really strange. But look, I will have to do 1,000 videos when I've shaved my hair. We've reached 1,000 subs. Ta-da! And people are like, what the? happened to you?" And I went, "Oh, I had an accident with a lawnmower." And but no, I've been growing my hair now for yeah, 2.5 years. I last cut my hair in August 2020. No, no, my hair's not the right length. I would not be doing my heat because it'll be all over the place. No, I will not be recording it simply because my neighbour's got to cut my hair for me, and I don't want to be faffing with the phone and all that. I want him to actually cut my hair, and then we'll just come in and go, ta-da! I could record it, but I'd rather just get my hair shaved. I could make a lot of views um, on it, but it's going to be weird having no hair. It really is. And new subscribers have been coming in going, hang on a second, he's mentioned when he hits 1,000 subs, he's going to cut his hair because they've obviously watched older content. Oh, let's just get some mates to subscribe. Obviously, a guy looked like he's got the, he's survived. I'm not going to make the joke because it's really offensive, but I will look like I survived treatment of a horrible disease. Um, Does my family or my inner circle like my long hair? Some of my friends want me to keep it. Some of my friends want me to go full mullet, where I shave just the sides and have the Aussie mullet going, or the redneck mullet, and then I look like I've been on a driving ban since the age of 3. Um, some other friends, like my next door neighbour, go, "I want it gone. It's got to go." And a few of my female friends are like, "Oh, you look kind of sexy with it," or "I miss you with short hair." Um, it's an interesting one. Watch out! If you cut your hair in winter, you could catch a chill. Serious. I've already had I've already had the cold with the long hair, and that's why we have beanie hats for. And when your hair gets wet, it's actually when it rains. It's rained so much the last month. It actually means you're more like it's horrible. It's not pleasant. Um, and the job I do, you actually get kind of hot and sweaty quite a bit, and that's not particularly pleasant either. And then when you cool down, you've got this sweaty, wet mop of hair. It's not actually that comfortable, and it blows all over the place in the wind. But no, I've had my long hair now. I think my family and friends have got used to it because I've been growing it for so long that they just accepted the the hair. I've sort of forgotten what it's like to have short hair. I would have to look on the channel history and go, right, August 2020, I think it was like the 21st, 24th, around then in the August, I shave it all off. And the first comment I get on the first video I do is, "Oh my god, are you seriously ill? Have you been going for chemotherapy?" And I was like, "No, I just had a haircut." And you can see my tan line across my head. This is the longest I've had my hair since I was like 3 years old. I had quite long hair when I was a toddler, and then my mum was like, "No, we're having a haircut." So I refused to go to the hair. I refused to sit still for the hairdresser, so I had long hair. I can't grow a full beard, unfortunately, but my moustache and sideburns grow back within a week. No, because I've stated I would do this for so long. I think my look has become the mullet, but before it was the baseball cap, and I miss wearing the baseball cap, and I can't wear it comfortably with this hair. It's weird. Because of my ADHD, I'm very fidgety. So you'll see me in live streams like now fidgeting with my hair. I'm very OCD, and like my hair is a mess. I mean, look at it. I mean, it's it it it's long. It's Jesus. I think the early days of the channel, I would cut my hair every 6 months to a year, and then since I've lived here, I've cut it once, and I just haven't bothered. I think the COVID pandemic had a role to play in that because the local barber shop obviously had to shut down again. You had to pre-book, and a lot of people. And it was just my beard. I last shaved. Shit, I shaved for my mate's funeral at the end of August, so it's been about 4 months. 4 months, I think. I think I've trimmed it maybe once, but that's about 4 months growth, 3 months growth. Doesn't take long. My beard and my mullet grow quite quick. My hair's so thick. It's 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 frustrating because obviously yeah. No, I'm not doing that because I'll get slaughtered at work. And because I'm a public facing job, I couldn't. I could probably have my hair dyed, but not my beard. And I don't want to anger work right now because work's being a bit crappy at the moment. And while I would love to do that for charity, and I would love to do that if the channel was obviously making a lot of money and I reached the other subscription thresholds like the view hours or the shorts views. Um, it it would be one of them. But no, I've got to ask my neighbour if he'd be willing to cut my hair this evening, and then I will do a video going, "Ta-da! It's off." Um, and then the next goal is obviously hit 2,000 subscribers, and that will then ultimately entail finding a Burnley shirt or getting sent a Burnley shirt from someone. What's my day job? I'm a bin man. I work in waste disposal. When I first started the channel up, I was working as a paralegal. I got a job in as an office in a law office, property, so civil law office, property law conveyances as a paralegal, and then I was a farm labourer, and I was also working at an industrial washing plant for shipping engine parts. So I was a jet washer. Yes. So I've worked in a lot of different jobs, but I've been in waste disposal as a bin man, but I've worked in waste disposal before since 2019. So it's nearly 4 years. It doesn't pay well, no, it really doesn't, because we're classed as unskilled labour. Yet the country needs us to keep going, otherwise the country fills up with shit. This is what people don't realise is very lowly paid people like myself have been keeping the country going for the last 3 years on very little money, and none of us have had a bonus. No, I actually enjoyed working on the farm. It was a good laugh. I got paid more working as a farm labourer per hour in real terms than I do now. The union's toothless. It really is. Management are just incompetent. The union's not as strong as you think, and there's a lot of politics as well involved with everything. Um, but no, I've been working in the industry I've been in now for the best part of 4 years. I enjoy my job. I just don't like the people I work with. Mostly management. Management have caused a lot of problems. And I know at least some of management are probably watching this, both past and present. And I will say some management have not been up to scratch. And that's personal. Some managers have been great. And there's one manager I still have as a friend on Facebook. I still talk to him. There's a former charge hand who still watches and subscribes to the channel. I get on with really well. And then there's, and they leave comments occasionally. And then there's management at my last depot, less said the best. And the current management, I have mixed views on the current. I try and avoid going in the office basically. Um, yeah, no, wear eye protection when you're using anything that cuts anything. I've got plenty of goggles. No, I used to work at a science research facility before I had the channel. I've done various jobs. A lot of them have been pretty hard graft. And but they've been fun. I've met some interesting people. I've come doing this job. I've met some very interesting people. I've met some football players, some rugby players, actors, musicians, politicians. I currently do Theresa May's bins, former Prime Minister. I used to do Ross Kemp, former EastEnders, now documentary maker, actor and journalist. I used to do his bins. Steve Ryder, the ITV. Um, the public are mental. We had one guy on Friday go, "Are you guys going on strike?" And we're like, "No." He goes, "Well, I would support you if you would." And then he slipped us 20 quid. I was like, "Lad." And then we realised he always slips us 20 quid. Like, hang on a second. I've done your bins before. He was a very nice gentleman. Very nice old man. But yeah, the current politics, I think, it's a discussion for the other channel. I will be doing a video on my thoughts on the current political situation with where the country's at, but that's another thing. String streamers are one of the hardest things to start. Hold the trigger in slightly and yank it. It will start quicker. Same with a lawnmower with a pull start. Hold the throttle in just ever so slightly. It's like a choke, and then launch it. It will work better. Same with a chainsaw. Anything that has a 2-stroke or 4-stroke engine, you just got to be careful on the choke or the throttle. Just slightly and give it a more of a yank. No, but I met Ross Kemp. I've met Steve Ryder, ITV touring car presenter on the ITV coverage on ITV4. Brian May of Queen. Best one, Brian Blessed. Dave, my pretties, Dave. Watch Flash Gordon from 1982. You'll understand what I'm gibbering on about. Lawnmowers were always in. Yeah, I don't know why we're talking about like 2-stroke petrol motors that belong in garden equipment, but they are fun, especially if it's a chainsaw. Great fun. Yes, chopping things. But I love the smell of 2-stroke, so I just yeah. But you just got to be a bit careful with the choke and the throttle, and once you've got that, it's piece of piss. Just don't let go of the button. Just hold that button and you'll be fine, or the lever, whatever it is. Yeah, it'll go. It's all about getting that starter motor kicking over. But no, I've met some pretty famous people. Interesting. Not a lot of people ask what job I do, and it is what it is. 2018, I think the channel was at its healthiest for like growth. It was growing so quickly. I was working as a farm labourer, and that was so much fun. But it was a very hot. I remember 2018 was a bloody hot summer, and so I had to take a month off. I had to take a month off because at the time my room was upstairs in the house I was living in. Heat obviously rises. I got a thermometer and I hung it. So I had a lampshade similar to the lampshade I have in here. I hung it off the lampshade with the window open. Bearing in mind I had the window, and it was 56 degrees. According to that, I was like, "How the hell am I not dead?" So I had to take a little bit of time to go. This summer's getting too hot. It's not healthy. And so I had to just go. I've got to take a step back and focus on just getting it out, basically. But the real worst part of that job was clearing up those leaves. Yeah, the amount. Yes, I live in a block of flats, and yes, this is hidden away, surrounded by big houses. Yeah, I feel sorry for those landscape gardeners. Get the leaf blower, blow it in the fucking road. Let the traffic deal with it. No, seriously. Um, yeah, no, I would say doing my job. It could be tomorrow's going to be quite chilly. I will be down to my jumper with my sleeves rolled up by 7:30 because you are moving constantly, constantly moving, and you're caught. You just and it's I we had an ex squaddy, an ex army guy couldn't cope with it. Could not cope with it. The round sizes, my bin collection rounds now are smaller than what they were at my first depot. My biggest round was 24 miles on my feet a day, and we had a guy with a pedometer, and yeah, 24 miles. We were doing the equivalent of a marathon on a shift. Um, so you have to have a certain level of fit. You don't realise my fitness level is probably a lot higher than I realised, and I've definitely after my accident a year and a half ago when I had my motorcycle accident. I keep saying last year, but it's obviously 2023. In the summer of 2021, when the Euros was on, I obviously had my just after the Euros. I had my motorcycle accident, my last one, and I didn't work for 2.5 months. It has taken me the better part of a year and I'm going to say year and a half to get back to the fitness I was at before the accident. And when people talk, and I'm going to link this back into sport. So when you're looking at a player who's had a shoulder injury or a knee injury, maybe a back problem, an ankle injury, or they might have torn their groin, they could have had a bad concussion, they've had a lengthy spell where they're told you can't train, you've just got to rest up and let the body heal. Do your physiotherapy, but no training. And they're not even on light training duties. To get that fitness back is ridiculous. Now, as soon as they're on light duties, they're allowed back in the gym. Now, I had some other health complications in relation to my accident, but that tells you how supremely fit a rugby union or a rugby league or an ice hockey player or an NFL player, how really fit they actually are. One of the guys at my last job was yeah, a lot of these lower skilled jobs you are gonna have. I've worked with alcoholics, drug addicts, ex addicts, gambling addicts. I've worked with some gambling addicts who would spend like they would pay their rent, they would pay their bills, and instead of buying food, one of the lads, two of the lads actually, on their little tea break because they used to do the little cage lorry, they're in the off license corner shop and they're buying 50 quid worth of scratch cards, and they would do that for 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Because Tuesday, Saturday, and Friday are the lottery days, but they would double up on a Tuesday. He would buy less scratch cards on a Tuesday. He would buy a lottery ticket on a Tuesday. So it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. At one point, it was every day of the week, and then he worked out the lottery days were Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday. And so he would buy one scratch card. The other days he would buy two. So it really got weird. There was a couple of alcoholics we used to work with, proper full blown alcoholics. We did have some druggies. We had one, and this is the problem. And when it's the working classes, well, those on lower incomes, the media has a certain way of spinning it. But when it's a high profile athlete doing a Diego Maradona, for example, or a Gaza, the attitude towards them is different, rightly or wrongly, and how they get reported and how the narrative is twisted. At the same time, it shows how supremely fit Maradona was to be absolutely off his tits, and Gaza, apart from right at the end when 98, he was clearly needing help. But it shows how supremely fit these guys are to go out on a session on, let's say, a Thursday or a Friday night and play on the Saturday off their rocker. It shows, same with Merson. I mean, I know um, Tony Adams was sober by the time Wenger appears after George Graham. The last 2 seasons, I think, last season and a half of George Graham, he was already sober. But it also shows how good Tony Adams was at the peak of his career when he's basically an alcoholic. He's full-blown alcoholic. So he's drinking before games. George Best. It honestly shows how. Imagine George Best sober. Imagine George Best completely sober. Just imagine Adrian Mutu completely sober. That's a more modern player in the last 20 years. Can you imagine Adrian Mutu sober? Just let that sink in. How good they were, sober them up. So they don't have the hangovers. They've not got to flush the drugs out of their system. Not been sick. They're able to fully focus. They're not irritable. Imagine them fully sober. How ridiculous these players. I mean, this is where people go, oh, the GOAT debate. Is it Ronaldo? Is it Messi? Is it Fat Ronaldo, the original Ronaldo? Ronaldo Nazario, obviously the knees did him in with the wedge haircut. And you've got Pele. Can you imagine if Maradona was sober all those years? Can you actually imagine? Just let that. And then you look at, other sports. So Bob Probert in the NHL. The guy was a machine. He wasn't an enforcer, even though he was the best fighter of all time. But he wasn't a pure. Can you imagine if he was sober off the drink and drugs, how good he would have been? Might still even be alive. Can you imagine Grant Fuhr wins all those Stanley Cups with the Oilers? Can you imagine him completely sober? Might even be worse, but. But honestly, can you seriously, Kuznetsov, the Russian player, got caught with cocaine and failed a test. I think was it 2018 or 2019 World Championships IIHF? Can you honestly imagine? And so we've got some of the best athletes in their chosen field. Like Michael Jordan, he likes a drink, basketball. Imagine him sober, because he wasn't always sober during the Chicago Bulls era. on that dream team in the Olympics in Barcelona. Can you imagine him bloody sober? Because he's admitted he drink a bit too much. So when you're looking at, you know, and I will say this, I'm going to use football as the example. I will, and I'm going to Ray Parlour, the Romford Pele. Now Ray Parlour was a good box-to-box midfielder, not outstanding, and he always on the old sauce. And he's admitted on TalkSport that he was a pisser. He still is, and he's known to have a drink. But can you imagine him sober? Like Paul Merson, Gaza, Maradona, Best. There's some other players as well. He was, straight up. Greavesy, Jimmy Greaves was a pisshead. He was an alcoholic. It's well known. Not as bad, not as publicly as bad as others, but he was on the sort. And Greaves is possibly the best striker Tottenham and England has ever had. For goals per game ratio, he was ridiculous. He just gets injured in the '66 World Cup. Like, it could have been him getting that hat trick instead of Jeff Hurst. But imagine Jimmy Greaves sober the entire time. You can't. Because the media perception and the spin and the narrative that's put on it is that that's how he was. He was a character. Imagine him so. And then you look at Tommy Raudonikis in rugby league. He was famously would go out pissed, play drunk. Imagine him sober. It'd be ridiculous. He might actually have killed someone on the pitch. 4 big aisles at my local supermarket set aside for booze. Everyone's on something these days. It numbs the pain. Yes, yes, it does. And the government likes the tax revenue from it to not put in the NHS or public services, but in the pockets of their friends on dodgy PPE contracts. Sorry, that's a video for the other channel. Sleaze and corruption in the Tory party. We've been here before, haven't we? Yeah, Jimmy Greaves was a world class. Watch the footage of him as young. No, yeah, Jimmy Greaves. There's a, I mean, and then you get into the '70s and the '80s, the Maradona era. Who was there was a Brazilian player, Socrates, pisshead, Brazil captain, famously very very drunk, and one of his team. Who was the '74 player? He had the blonde mullet in for Brazil. Pisshead died young. Oh God, so many. Garincha, alcoholic. The one with the bowed legs, alcoholic. How he lost his virginity is an interesting tale. Was it with a goat? Was it with a prostitute? We just don't know. But there's tales around sexual misadventure there. But yeah, alcoholic. Best winger of all time, Garincha. Look him up. Trying to think. There are some other players who are raging alcoholics and drug users. Carlo Canigia, cokehead. 1990 World Cup gets side in half by that in the Colombia game, gets hacked down. Famously, a Maradona off wish, damn good winner, right? Damn good winner. There were tales about Yermolenko. He likes to drink. Former West Ham player. He's on the odd source a lot. Andrei Arshavin, was he a spy? I think rumours of athletes being spies are exaggerated. Really are. And if you're a Russian athlete now, I mean, yes, he was involved with the Russian FA getting the World Cup for 2018 after he retired. But Alexander Ovechkin and Kuznetsov, they're from St. Petersburg. Anyone from St. Petersburg who's an athlete, he's got it. That's not the case. A lot of them are actually feeling very uncomfortable about the position that their government and the Western governments, these are just average. What we got? Huguenots, snooker, sex with goats, darts, pegging, football, feminism. I haven't mentioned. Have I mentioned the PPE contracts? Boris Johnson. I think both channels cover everything, but in a way with a bit of tongue-in-cheek humour without, effing and blinding. There have been rumours about certain high-profile athletes maybe having spied or defected or whatever. If I feel sorry for the issue with Russian athletes is there's a perception that they're all cheating, they're all breaching doping regulations, and they're all friends with Putin. That isn't the case. Panarin, the ice hockey player, his family were threatened. He's very anti-Putin. He had before the invasion of Ukraine, his family were threatened. There was a smear campaign against him in the media, and he had to get the rest of his family out of Russia. Um, there was McGillney back in the day. They had to smuggle him out. Um, so I do feel sorry for those athletes that aren't pro regime, and I feel Ovechkin's one of the best players of all time in the NHL. There are many photos of him shaking hands with Putin at these award ceremonies, and when Russia have done something well, they won a medal, and he's in the Kremlin and all that, or the presidential palace having a meeting. The what are and there's a lot of Russian players who play in the NHL, and we'll see what happens. Like because there was a lot of pressure in the off season about would their visas be renewed, would they be allowed to play, sanctions, and I feel this is unfair because a lot of them rarely step foot in the motherland, to be fair, because they're contracted over in North America. They buy property in North America. They meet up for a World Championships. It's normally in Western or Central Europe. Um, and it's a very difficult position to be in. Right, what we got here? Political question to do with the Conservative Party. We'll leave that for the other channel. I think Nigel Farage, leave that for the other channel. That's personal opinion. I want to keep as much sport as possible. But yes, Huguenot, snooker, sex with goats, darts, pegging, feminism, football. This channel has everything. You can start rugby league and rugby union there, and Eddie Jones possibly getting a coaching assistant job in rugby league. Michael Chaker, will he get a rugby league job as well with what he did with Lebanon? Would the Argentines be happy to lose him? Arshavin was his one. Again, Andre Arshavin, he's an enigma. By the time he comes out, if he was really, you know, Putin's buddy, which he would play for Chelsea, he played for Arsenal. Although the guy who owned Arsenal at the time was also a Russian, Usmanov. Yeah, one of the oligarchs has been sanctioned. So there's definitely something about the ownership of both Chelsea and the ownership of um, Arsenal, and I think to a certain extent Tottenham because Roman Pavlyuchenko uh, ended up playing for Spurs, Povrebniak ended up playing for Reading, and there's a link. There's meant to be Russian investment in Reading at certain points with Badesky had some Russian friends. Some of these Russian players that came over to play are not Kanchelskis from Man United in the mid-90s. That's a completely different thing. But some of the modern era Russian players, so the last 15 years, they've all played for clubs in either the home counties or in London. And it is very interesting. Zhirkov, one of the Zhirkov brothers, played for Chelsea, or yeah. There's been a few who played for Chelsea, a few played for Arsenal, and and Spurs and Reading. They're London home counties, and that is an interesting one. Very interesting one. I don't know. It's complicated. I will say this: in my there has been Russian money in the English game. Now been replaced with American money again. So Bournemouth, Arsenal, Chelsea, the money's now American. It was Russian. So we just swapped one suspicious ownership kind of model for the other. Might be another. In regards to the politics side of it, on a jokes aside, I try and keep the politics on the other channel. Now, yes, the COVID pandemic and some of the social issues that we've seen protests in regards to obviously have raised the question of politics and sport intertwining in a way we haven't seen before, with professional sport at least. We've seen the FA, dragged in front of the Parliamentary Select Committee on Culture, Media and Sport on more than one occasion. The whole Mark Sampson thing, restructuring of the FA, the Wembley fiasco at the Euros, COVID loans given out and grants given out, and so there has been political involvement in professional sport in the last 3 years. We've seen emergency loans given to cricket, rugby league, rugby union, non-league football, ice hockey, uh, all the Olympic sports that Great Britain or the UK and Northern Ireland compete in Great Britain. Um, Various funding models for the devolved Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and of course Sport England. And and obviously we've now seen what the HM Revenue and Customs, Scunthorpe are in the shit. Is a good way to describe it, and are in deep trouble. Um, we've seen what happened with Derby County. We obviously saw the political involvement with the Chelsea situation. And so when we have to discuss these things, well, I want to keep politics off the channel as much as possible, which is near enough impossible now. There are certain things that happen, like the European Super League. There was a debate in Parliament about it. There was politicians airing their concerns about community assets, which is what sports teams and clubs are in Europe. They are community assets, ending up in the wrong. Mesut Ozil, never understood him. Do you have an attitude problem, unhappy, cultural issues? Mesut Ozil, he's always been hit and miss as a player. Same happened at Real Madrid, he would be brilliant. But Mesut Ozil's from that Turkish immigrant background to Germany. And he was facing a lot of backlash in 2018 back at home. He faced a lot of crap from on social media in Germany. His time at Arsenal was mixed. Some days he was brilliant, other days the rest of the team are carrying him. He is a confidence player. There is no doubt on Mesut Ozil's ability. No doubt at all. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a cultural issue because Muzzy is it is again a British Turk, should we say, who I could compare him to in background, being Turkish and coming to Western Europe. Muzzy is it being of Turkish or Kazim Richards is another one. Had perfect attitude and application. They may be a bit less skillful, but perfect attitude and application, and had played for their country at major tournaments. But they chose Turkey. They could have chosen England. They chose Turkey. Mesut Ozil was an interesting one because he chose Germany over Turkey. The other two players I mentioned chose Turkey over England in this instance. So that's where I say that the cultural background is the same, as in they either were born in Turkey or one or both of their parents are Turkish, and they're in Western Europe. Mesut Ozil faced a barrage of criticism his entire time at Arsenal and for a lengthy period at Real Madrid as well. I forget what German club he played for first. Before he went to Real Madrid, he played. Was it Bayern or was it Dortmund? It might have been Hamburg or Werder Bremen. I forget. I'll have to look at the German club he played for. Obviously, the photograph with him with President Erdogan, Turkey, didn't go down well. That went down quite badly. As I say, there's no doubt on his ability. Attitudes. When we talk about attitude problem, is it application? Is it internal personal confidence? I think it's more the internal personal confidence. This is where you find out he suffered from anxiety or something, and we're being heavily critical of a guy who's been battling with a medical condition. And I bet you that is the case, and he'll probably say that in due course. I wouldn't say it's a cultural issue. People of Turkish origin are exceptionally proud of themselves, be it as an immigrant population in a country assimilating themselves, or going back to Turkey and doing well. But no, his time at Arsenal was bad. But I think there are got to be mitigating circumstances. I don't think he dealt well with the constant, and it wasn't just criticism; it was pure out abuse he got online, and there was some xenophobic elements to that. I think there's definitely maybe a depression or confidence or anxiety issue, like performance anxiety. He was definitely a confidence player, and on his day, he could be the best player, not only on that particular pitch, but in Western Europe. I remember famously at Real Madrid, he took the ball off Ronaldo and took the free kick and scored it. He goes, "No, I'm doing it." He could be But then there was a famous piece of footage of you had Mertesacker going. I think they had drawn the game, maybe lost the game. He goes, no, you clap the fans. The fans are giving, paying hard, and he's sulking. And Mertesacker grabs him and goes, no. And he doesn't tell him in German, which he could have done. He tells him in English. Because to tell him in German creates a clique, creates a wall around them. There's, we're and he goes, no, this is not acceptable. He shouts it. He goes, no, you clap, you say thank you to the fans for coming. Okay, we got the draw, whatever. I think it was like in a feisty match, and they were up and down or whatever. Very entertaining game as a neutral, and he's club captain, the same nationalities, ripping him without swearing. This is what's very interesting. Mertesacker could have called him all names under the sun in German and English, and he goes, no, that is not the right attitude. Da 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 da. And he's sulking, and he's like this, and he's like, no, put your hands up, put your head up, thank them for coming. Okay, we didn't get the result. You clap them, you say thank you for coming. You might give a young fan your shirt. You show appreciation, and then we have if you want to sulk in the dressing room and not be happy with yourself, that's different. But Mertesacker criticised his attitude publicly on the pitch with the pitch side microphones. And I think when he starts having a go, he starts in German, and he goes, no, I'm going to do this in English. So the other teammates can actually hear me criticising as a team. That player has got a bad attitude. We need to be better. So then actually there was that kind of mood swing. Now this is where we find out Mesut Ozil's got bipolar or he's got anxiety, and it's a horrible thing. Mental health is a horrible thing. We're being brutal to it. But as I say, on his day he was brilliant. As before, as for politics, Twitter is the worst of politics and geopolitics. It's just LARPing all the time. Live action role play. Oh, someone's brought LARP into it. I've got a friend who's actually. I've got a couple of friends who do LARP, where they actually wear the suits of armor and they go around the woods with their bows and arrows and their swords and shields, made on 3D printers and LARP, which is they pretend they're a knight of the realm or a highwayman, like stand and deliver, like Dick Turpin. I actually have friends who do actual live action roleplay LARP. But no, Twitter. What I've noticed when Twitter first comes around, the sports world loved it. They grabbed it and went, right. We can really get our brand, our players, our athletes, our teams closer with the fans. We can engage better with the fans on a more personal, quicker level. And for the first couple of years, there was more good than bad. And I'm saying this. The Olympics in 2012, I think, is the turning point where Twitter's at its best, and some of the witty responses and these sports teams and athletes and the Olympic teams and all that really engaging really well with the fans. The last decade, we have seen obviously a big political shift with division and separation. On the sports side of things, and I want to keep this purely on sport, it has become the cesspit of humanity. It is an open sewer, it's open season. And I don't know where we go from here. It's like with the Euros with the England team, the abuse they received, those young players. The women's Euros, the constant barrage against the commentators and presenters and some of the players. Almost constant. The Harry Maguire situation at Man United. We can all argue whether that's the correct transfer, whether Man United overpaid and Leicester were like milking it, whatever. The fact he had not only death threats by idiots, but someone putting a bomb threat against him and his family is just ridiculous. Although this has always happened because Neil Lennon, when he was Celtic manager the first time, got sent actual bullets in the post, hollow points saying we're going to kill you and your family because of the fact that the sectarian nature of that rivalry and Protestants and Catholics. And I think Celtic will go through a bit of a rough patch, and and that was before Twitter really kicks off. I feel sorry for Steve Bruce, we can debate his managerial highs and lows and him as a player, and I could do a video on Steve Bruce, like his career as a player, his career as a manager, the highs and lows of Steve Bruce as a player is fantastic. Never got selected for England, by the way, which is a travesty. And it's right to criticise, going, okay, Steve, we as fans don't think, or as viewers, okay, you've been found out tactically here or there. If he wins that FA Cup with Hull, the conversation's different. He can retire then and go, I don't have to manage ever again. I've become another English manager to win a major trophy. Fantastic. They lose that final and the rest is history. Aaron Ramsey, thank you very much. Hello, Arsene Wenger. You win the FA Cup a record number of times. So it's FA Cup, it's Arsene Wenger's Cup, really. And some clubs have won less trophies than Arsene Wenger's won FA Cups. Let that sink in. Um, Steve Bruce, when his son, who is also an ex-professional, comes out and goes, Dad's really feeling it. This is getting ridiculous. We've had to contact the police on X number of occasions now. This is more than just frustrated fans. This is hate. I felt sorry for him. Gareth Southgate has faced a lot of crap. Now, yes, results speak for themselves. In 3 big games, we've come up short. But in total, he's only lost the 3 big games of tournament, really. Where the team were to where the team are, much better. Eddie Jones, when he was in charge of England, doesn't give, he'll just give the B side. He's a completely different kettle of fish because he'll give it back. He's used to having all that because he's an ex front row forward in rugby union, and they're just mad. The Joe Marler situation. There are people actually defending Joe Marler. This is a guy who's made racial slurs, technically sexually assaulted an opposition player, and then has made derogatory comments about, an opposition player's mother who's seriously ill. We don't know what was actually said. And there are people there defending Joe Marler. This is ridiculous. I'm sorry. And again, I was like, I just summed it up in a sentence. I said, anyone who defends Joe Marler is defending racism and sexual assault and is condoning that kind of behaviour. Very quickly, people were like, someone's actually speaking sense. I said, no, he's not a very good player. He's not even making a very good clown. It's just, he is showing signs of CTE. Get your brain checked, please, Joe. I should I do 10-minute specials on like Steve? I could do, breakdowns of Gareth Southgate's career, Steve Bruce's career. I mean, people are criticising these people, yet they haven't played sport of any kind of nature since they were at school. We've got people, mostly in the middle age, who's the last time they did any physical activity apart from banging their wife or mistress or girlfriend was in year 12, sports day, and they tripped over and stacked it in the 100 metres. Or they weren't even good enough to get in the first 11 or first 15 at rugby or football or whatever, and they were not even picked to play. Right? We've got people who are sat there in front of their laptop or on their phone or in front of TV, they have a smart TV, and they're ranting and raving, vein bulging, and there's a term, it's called football widows or weekend widows, where the wives and girlfriends lose their partner for the weekend because the football or the rugby's on or the whatever sport it is, and they're sporting widows, as it's known. And then, depending on the result, they either have a good night's sleep or domestic violence. And studies have proven, and women are also guilty of this as well, if they're passionate fans. And there are some very passionate female fans out there. There's enough footage online of them losing their bananas and dropping. Oh my god! There's one where the woman actually beats the man up and knocks him sparko, and the poor bloke is trying to prevent his own partner getting battered. For no power, we don't know why. We don't know the reason. He stepped and goes, "Look, calm down," and she just right hooks him, and he goes, and he's out. Do a 10-minute special on Blackburn Rovers FC Jack Walker years. Right up your. I have done the Blackburn history video, I think 4 or 5 years. I've got to update it. I could look at the Jack Walker years. I could look at the highs and lows. One thing you'll notice about this channel, I don't really do a lot of content on the teams I support because I fear that A, I'll become far too biased, and B, I would lose the impartiality that I like to think that I have. So I was really bemused when Burnley sacked Sean Dyche because they got relegated. Now, yeah, Vincent Kompany's doing a fantastic job. for our biggest rivals, and he is doing a fantastic job. I don't like seeing managers get sacked all the time, and Sean Dyche was sacked twice by Burnley. Let that sink in. The fact he went back there a second time gets them into Europe a couple of seasons later. Sorry, Sean, bye. And Americanos for you, go. No, bye. We demand you in the Premier League. We can't even survive relegation. Now you're fine. I think I could do a look at the managerial career of Kenny Dalglish. I could do a managerial view on Steve Bruce. I could do a look at the managerial success of. I could do managerial profiles of Brian Clough, Howard Wilkinson. Let Cantona go to Leeds after dropping him from St. James. I'm not going to have you. Yeah. I could do profiles on ex-managers and players who have retired. No, I've done that before. I find though, unless it's a particular player or manager, it doesn't get a lot of views. So while it might be entertaining for those guys or for you lot who may like it doesn't interest the casual fan. Luis Suarez, he hasn't technically finished his career yet, so until Suarez has finally gone and hung up the boots, I won't do a video because that will date very badly very quickly. Diego Forlan, I could do a video on. I could look at Diego Forlan, and we could debate why it didn't work at Man United. I could do a Diego Forlan. James Rodriguez, still playing. Still playing. I don't like doing videos of active players at whatever sport they're doing because they still have the rest of their careers in front of them. Now that Gareth Bale's retired, I could do a video on Gareth Bale's career. Absolutely. That'd be fun. Because people forget he played for Southampton. And people forget for the first 56 games that he played for Tottenham, Tottenham lost or drew, they couldn't win. Had a terrible record. Then they change it from left back to a left winger and they win everything. As for Tyson Fury hanging with a gangster. Well, the way he deals with the Sky reporter, I'm assuming you talk about the Kinahan card, Daniel, was it David or Daniel? Daniel Kinahan. MTK Global, the boxing thing. Tyson Fury is an interesting one because obviously he had his drugs ban and his mental health struggles, and I understand that. The way he deals with the Sky reporter is fantastic. Whether you agree with the things. Unfortunately, I think because I think he is fully. It's like Ben and Eubank Senior, Ben Senior and Eubank Senior, the Essex boys. Boxing has always had this unfortunate link with the underworld, and unfortunately, it rears its ugly head a lot. And in regards to the MTK Global and all that situation, and the gym in Marbella, Ben went to train in Marbella before his fight in I think 94, 95. No, we're not having that one. I know a lot of gypsies; they're not all gangsters. It's a misconception. They're dodgy. They won't pay all their national insurance and their wages correctly and their tax. But I'm not allowing that comment simply because I know a lot through the job. I work with some. I'm friends with some. Some of them are dodgy, so I actually pay their national insurance and tax. If you ever do any cash and down work for a gypsy, they're probably going to give you some moosey gold and a dog. They will look after you. Most travellers actually are like you. There is a proportion of them that yes get up to some dodginess, and they're the ones who generally are the ones who don't live on a proper traveller site or in a council house. They're the ones who've been kicked out of the community because they're bringing disgrace to it. And I'm being honest there. That is the honest truth. The travellers who you see camping illegally are the ones that have been booted off legal sites because they brought their family name into disrepute. They're the ones that the community don't want. They're the that is honest truth. That is honest truth. They're the ones that aren't hardworking, that are dodgy, that are involved with things that are seen to be not in keeping with their culture. So that'd be drugs, that'd be armed robbery, that'd be the more violent side of things where they've allowed certain issues where they do the bare knuckle boxing and they've done it in a place that too public. They've hurt someone who's not a gym, whatever it may be. They've been told to do one. Okay, I'll let the crackhead one. Most crackheads don't have teeth because of the way they smoke the crack pipe, roxy gums and enamel. I've done my rehabilitation. I've gone to meetings. Um, I've done the addiction meetings, and when you're in the initial uh, the initial meeting, um, you'll have people with all different addictions, and you get put into the specialists one-to-one or group sessions where you. Well, I've got a friend who's an ex addict, and he's now a volunteer, and he's getting his tokens. I've got another friend; she's an ex-alcoholic. She's 2 years sober, getting her tokens. Um, Unfortunately, yet there are people who are functioning, as I said about again these athletes who have got drug issues. Imagine if they were sober, how much better they would be. Just let that sink in. The Maradona argument. Can you imagine if George Best or Maradona or Paul Merson or Paul Gascoigne or whatever insert player who's known to have a drink or a smoke or lines of drugs? Um, Imagine. I know there are athletes in other sports. I mean, Greg Inglis, rugby league, pisshead, banned for drink driving. Yes, he's got his depression and his bipolar, and he's admitted to that. He's now getting help. But Greg Inglis, alcoholic. Can you imagine Greg Inglis sober? God, possibly one of the best players ever to play the game. Greg Inglis. Imagine Greg Inglis sober. He was destroying people half cut. Uh, but no, in regards to the Tyson Fury question, we'll go back to that. I think that is a grey area with boxing in general, and I think he got bored of the constant same question going. Well, he's been indicted by the FBI, GCHQ, all these various agencies. Um, that is alleged, yes. There's been domestic violence allegations. There have been drink and drug driving. I think they were proven as well. Sam Burgess, unfortunately, one of his brothers has been done for sexual assault as well. Two of the four Burgess brothers haven't come from themselves in glory. I think it's George. Was it? No, well, who went to St George Illawarra? Was it George or Tom? Sam and George, I believe, are the ones who let the family down. The other two brothers are pretty good. In regards, as before, Michael Jordan, he was gambling on NBA games. That is true to that. Yes, and he liked. Apparently, he was a big bourbon fan. Um, yeah, Sam Burgess. That's a bit of a touchy subject. But he's Ben Barber's another one. Ben Barber. Look at his highlight reel from 2012. That try where he basically does a cartwheel to get it down. One of the best tries of all time. The other one where he was bouncing his in goal area, picks up, runs the length of the field and scores. Ben Barber in 2012 was unplayable. Defenders couldn't. Ben Barber, unfortunately, imagine the domestic violence side of it. Now he was never proven in a court of law, but because he had such a record of misdeeds, he failed drugs tests, disciplinary issues. I think the NRL are lucky he didn't sue them for and the North Queensland Cowboys for unfair termination of contract because of the Jack DeBellin situation. Um, but yeah, Ben Barber. Imagine if he played sober and didn't batter his misses all the time. He could look again. There are Jimmy the Jet Roberts, alcoholic, which is a shame. But he battled alcoholism, and yes, he had a very rough childhood, domestic violence, all that kind of thing, wasn't, I don't think, given the proper support he could have been. But on his day, in attack, brilliant player, defensively and obviously mental health wise, Jimmy the Jet Roberts. It is a unfortunate way that he's obviously decided to retire. Um, but again, alcohol and Paul Gallen. Well, that's a Cronulla Sharks issue. That's not a Gallen issue. That is the peptide scandal, and that is where the Essendon Bombers in the AFL, the Cronulla Sharks in the NRL, plus individual players at other clubs like Sandor Earl, who was thrown under the bus by the NRL. They threw him under the bus. They did. They didn't look after their asset. They threw him, and he was a Penrith player at the time. Or he might be Canberra. No, he was a Penrith. Was he Penrith or Canberra at the time? Sandor Earl was thrown under the bus by the NRL and the Australian Anti-Doping Agency, ASADA. They screwed him. But the problem is the whole scandal, the way it was handled by the doping authorities, the two leagues. I feel a lot of sympathy for some of the younger players caught up in that. I do. Well, Bronson Sherry, he got 4 years, 1 year backdated. He's eligible to be contacted for contracts as of this year, I believe, for 2024. He should be returning next year, another 12 months. But apparently he'd been doing it since he was 16 at Howard Mats, so going back to youth level. And I've got no sympathy because he knew what he was doing. When they caught him in 2019, he had 8 or 16 different banned substances in his system. Don't forget about Ben Cousins. Oh, Ben Cousins, I've watched both documentaries. The first one 10 years ago, and then the follow-up one. The follow-up one is more heartbreaking than the first one. The Ben Cousins, the AFL, well, one of his teammates died of a drugs overdose towards the end of his spell with the West Coast Eagles. It was making news over here, if you all remember, because he was one of the highest paid players, one of the best players in the game. He was their version of Maradona, basically. And the AFL was trying to bury its head in the sand in regards to there's not a drug problem in our sport. Clearly there is. Since Ben Cousins, there's been a whole host of other allegations against players. But he's the one who springs to mind. He's the one who jumps out at you. Same with the NRL. They are burying their head in the sand thinking it's isolated incidents when it's not. Because Stephen Dank was involved with both sports, with the peptides and the doping. Ben Cousins was not the only player high as a kite in the 90s and the 2000s. And now we find out what's happened at the Hawthorn Hawk. The culture is, as long as we're winning, we don't care. As long as we are successful on the field, we don't care what you do. There is an attitude of a boys drinking party culture. As long as you're winning, have as many schooners as you want. But I've watched both Ben Cousins documentaries. The first one is heartbreaking. The second one, he looks hopeless. He's been in and out of prison a couple of times on drugs offences for possession and intent. And then he bumps into current AFL players in the off-season, and they're like, "How you doing, man? Do you want to have a little kickabout with us in the park with our families?" He's like, "Okay, yeah, I'll come down." And they're like, "It is." There is no doubt on his ability and skill in his chosen sport. The problem is the AFL could never catch him out until he had drugs arrests. There was a famous incident where he was arrested. I can't remember if it was 2008 or 2010, and the police tested him for, I think, drink or drug driving, and it was bad. And and in the documentaries, if you watch the Ben Cousins story, I think it's called Part 1 and Part 2. Apparently, he started using drugs when he was still at school. How that wasn't picked up in the early 90s by coaches going, You're smoking crack. You're doing meth. You're doing coke. You're doing pills. You're doing whatever he was doing. He was doing everything under the sun. He was using when he was 15, 16 years old before he even signed a pro contract. So warning signs were missed, and early intervention was missed, which is on the AFL. That is on the clubs. That's on the AFL. That's on the scouts. That's on the coaches. That's on the system. Right? The fact, as an adult, he kept, you know, doing what he was doing and lying is another thing. But addicts do that. Ben Cousins, yeah, that was a bad period. Ben Flowers, didn't he get banned anyway later on? Not only for the punch, but he got banned for steroid abuse anyway. Zach Hardacre, I've done videos on Zach Hardacre. I think when he was in the NRL, I think he was using as well. Reason why he wasn't selected for England. Now, Zach Hardacre, no one wants to touch him with the barge pole, really. He's had assault allegations, road rage, driving under without a licence. Zach Hardacre is when you buy your Ben Cousins off Wish. There is no doubt he's a talented player. There is clearly issues there. Most addicts are suffering from some form of trauma or depression anyway. A lot of them have ADHD, like me. But Zach Hardacre was not helping himself. There have been court orders in place. He's faced racist, and homophobic charges as well. There's been assault charges again. The guy's got a, yeah. He's got problems, and he's cost his team a grand final. He's cost himself an international career. Because he could have gone to the last two World Cups. He could have played the World Cup 2017. He could have played last year's World Cup. He's cost himself an international career. He's cost himself a chance in the NRL because he didn't work at Penrith when he was there, but you could see that the issues were already in place. He's had lengthy bans for all sorts of issues. So I don't know where we go with Zach Hardacre. I mean, I could do a Zach Hardacre career video. I would be highly critical of him, but at the same time, having battled with alcohol was and drugs I've had issues with. I've got some very good friends who've struggled with it. It happens to normal people. Yeah, Ryan Tandy, I remember that. He did. Josh Dugan, he's got that bad boy image though. He doesn't help himself. He's now retired. Scott, the guy who used to play the Canberra and Melbourne, there's been a lot in rugby league, a lot, and I don't think the sport is willing to accept the yes, Josh Carney, I think, not Brian Carney, it's Josh Carney, the former Roosters halfback. Look, I still Mitchell Pearce. Well, I still think the sport is in denial because every off season players are misbehaving. Every off season. Now we've got less than 2.5 weeks until pre-season starts. The trial matches. Yes, Josh Carney did. Yes, he did. Greg Bird, another one. There was a few Titans players caught with cocaine. Kevin Proctor, Sean Kenny Dow, Reece Walsh is a recent one. With a lot of off-field incidents. Very early, Reece Walsh is one I think could be the next Ben Barber or Zach Hardacre. Ultimately talented, flawed individual. Wendell Saylor's son's been involved with legal issues. Wendell Saylor himself. Now Dylan Napa was filmed in 2013. That got released in 2018, 5 years after the event. I don't even think Dylan Napa was fully aware that was being filmed at the time. It was a consensual act. Doing what you're doing, obviously, it's embarrassing. He's not the one who's filming it. He hasn't asked the person to film it, be it male or female. We don't know who was filming it. And he copped a suspension as a result. But he's actually done nothing wrong. Now we don't know who was in the room with him. There are other people in the room. There is clearly alcohol involved. Whether there's drugs there is another thing. And it did ruin his career. And the Canterbury Bulldogs were like, "That's not fair on our player. We can't arbitrarily suspend him for something A, that happened 5 years ago, and B, he's got no control over, and C, nothing illegal has happened that we're aware of." And they did try and challenge that suspension, but this is under the Todd Greenberg era with the no fault, no stand down policy, which is shambles. Rugby league culture in Australia, you can blame the junior amateur clubs, binge drinking, or a good example. I think its culture comes from the top. I think the NRL is where you expect a higher standard of behaviour. They're still behaving like it's the Tommy Raudonikis era of the 80s, 70s, and 80s at West's Newtown Jets. They haven't evolved over the last 40 years. It's now a big global brand. They want to take games to the US. They're planning to this season. Most likely next season's a definite. They obviously are trying to grow the North American audience. They're trying to grow the domestic, trying to defeat the AFL domestically. They're trying to compete for as many corporate dollars as they can. Post-COVID, there's been a disruption to the youth development pathways. And in the last 3 years, we've seen the NRL CEO get changed. Greenberg out, Abdo in. Todd Greenberg, I think the amount of scandal in that era under Todd Greenberg, I think, did for him. I think there were other issues at play, but I think on a public PR front, every off-season was just beset with scandal. COVID was the perfect opportunity, I think, to make a change. Whether it's right or wrong, and the direction the NRL's taken with the rule changes and expansion and the way they're going about having 17 teams for a couple of seasons, we don't know. It looks very likely that North Sydney will be the 18th team. Now, whether that will work or not is another thing. Whether they have a team in Perth or another team in New Zealand, that's open to debate. But yeah, look, the Payne Haas situation, again, not his fault. However, he's a player who's had a fair few off-field incidents as well. Tavita Pangai is another one. Now, in this case, he's not personally involved, but Payne Haas had previous off-field indiscretion. Brisbane's got problems off the field. Reece Walsh, yet again, another off-field incident with him in the off-season. Starting to totting them up here. It's never a dull off-season. Now, it's been a quieter off-season than previous off-seasons, but rugby league has this ability of shooting itself in the foot every off-season. A player or players will do something really bloody stupid or be involved with something. Now, this is things are happening, and again, following the Todd Greenberg era, the public perception was the players are undisciplined. There is no the code of conduct. If there is one, is being flouted. Privileged position, with leadership. Now, certain things under Todd Greenberg were done well. Other things, a lot of money wasted. The NRL wasn't keeping up with topping up the pension part of the players' fund. A fair portion of that was missing. And there was a distrust between the clubs and the board, and there were people just trying to justify their salaries, getting paid big money to do not a lot, really. Should the NRL try the China market, a billion people, 1.4 billion people. China, um, China. Um, I don't think it's a sport that you can market to the Chinese. Um, really, um, you could argue football doesn't really work there. Um, again, the geopolitics. There's a big, there's a lot of political pressure in Australia right now to be careful with Chinese investment. It's become a very political issue. The amount of Chinese investment, vice versa, with, with the economy and opening up Australia more to the Southeast Asian economies and the risks that has economically. Um, South America, I think, is a good shout, but North and South America, I think, is a good shout for the NRL. Um, but I would be very, very careful. China. Oh gosh, I've got to do that. I have some. I'm not a crook. I'm just practicing my own form of deregulation, Mr. President. I'm doing my Nixon now, and then we can do Lyndon John. I will not send American boys halfway around the world to job at the bid. I'm not doing it. League is growing in Latin America, especially Jamaica with them. Yeah, I mean, look, I think if the NRL does take games to the US, there's a big West Indian community, and a lot of West Indian athletes go to university in the US for the collegiate athletic track and field programs. So there's a lot of athletes from Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, the Bahamas, Jamaica, who are, uh, in the US NCAA athletic system. And so to take the NRL there would and play games would be a massive, massive, massive commercial move. We know during COVID, when the NRL resumed play, and then the AFL resumed play, that the North American audience had some sport to watch, and they found ways to watch it, be it either whatever TV network or the NRL website or the AFL website, whatever. And they found a way to watch the Australian NRL and the AFL product, the Australian sports, and they found and the viewership went through the roof. Now they had about, I think, an 8-week spell where they were the only two major sports leagues going. I think Korean baseball gave it a wang as well, but for viewership in North America, they had the market share. Nothing was happening. The CFL in Canada didn't resume. There was the Major League Baseball were at loggerheads over the resumption to play talks. The MLS obviously played their mini tournament down in Florida. The NHL had their bubble, playoff format, expanded playoffs in locations as well, which mixed results on that. And so, because they basically got full seasons completed, and then 2021 full season completed, last year full season completed, that's put them in a very healthy position to sell their product to North America and Central and Southern South America as well, but in a healthy position. And I do honestly think they are going to attempt to grow the game in North America. And I think it could be successful. I really do. Um, I really believe that rugby league could work. Could work. I'm not saying it will work. It could. The ingredients are there. It's putting the ingredients together and baking a really nice sponge cake with extra cream. Um, it's getting the dough to rise and making a nice solid loaf of brown bread. ICC should push China to grow cricket. Now, I don't think it works. Again, the ICC have been discussing this for over a decade. No progress has been made. And no progress has been made. And when we're talking about sports corruption, look at snooker, we look at the match fixing allegations in a whole host of sports that are coming out of the triad games of Hong Kong and Macau. You are risking the integrity of the sport, considering that cricket is already beset with match fixing allegations that crop up regularly. Um, yes, China is very good at table tennis, very good at swimming. They've also got some decent track and field athletes. Um, they're growing into motorsport. They martial arts, obviously, any martial arts they're mad for. They're great consumers of the sports product. Great consumers. Um, they've obviously had the Olympics, both summer and winter in Beijing. They've had two Olympic Games. Um, they have qualified for a football World Cup, admittedly 21 years ago. But what is interesting is they are big consumers of our products, big consumers as sports fans. Um, they're good at gymnastics, good at swimming, good at table tennis. They got some decent track and field athletes. Motorsport, they're really picking up on. But when it comes to the team sports like football, rugby league, rugby union, ice hockey, hasn't really worked. And there's multiple reasons for that. It just hasn't. I mean, what they are, it's hard to describe, but it hasn't really worked. Their ice hockey team was woeful. They had to rely on North American Chinese, like Canadian Chinese and US Chinese players to form a team. Very few homegrown players in that for both the men's and the women's teams at the recent Winter Olympics. They have got a KHL team that can't even win a game, pretty much. Terrible team, always at the bottom of the league. So they've tried ice hockey in preparation for this Winter Olympics. Hasn't worked. They've obviously qualified for the 2002 World Cup. Haven't qualified since. They have had the F1 at Shanghai. I think it's Shanghai, the F1 track. But in reality, hasn't really kicked off, although there is a growing interest in motorsport. And so China is an enigma when it comes to sport. They do really well at the Olympics, but then in professional sport, they really struggle. So it's an enigma. But they are great consumers of products. So the NBA and the NHL have been taking pre-season games there. Major League Baseball has been interesting. There is clearly an interest to sell your product and for the merchandise sales and the TV rights and all that. But in reality, they're not very good at team sports. Yeah, you could argue. Well, Bangladesh are quite good at cricket, so they are decent at a team sport. But again, it's more of a cultural thing. A lot of the countries you're listing great at martial arts, which are generally individualistic sports. Philippines boxing and martial arts. Indonesia martial arts. Bangladesh cricket and field hockey. So Bangladesh are decent at some team sports, but again, it's a cultural thing about um, what is culturally seen as you know um, as accepted for cultural reasons. And yeah, there's a multitude of reasons why you could argue, and there's a whole. Is it funding? Is it? I wouldn't say it's one of the worst. It's better than what they were. Um, they've definitely improved over the last 20 years massively. It's a cricket mad country. They're not terrible. They're not amazing, but they're not terrible. Um, I think the battle for them to get test status took a very, very long time. But you've got to remember, Bangladesh has only been an independent country since 1977. So they haven't been an independent country for very long. The country's only 12 years older than me. Um, and because Bangladesh has had all these, floods, cyclones, and a lot of political instability, that does impact funding and grassroots development. Um, when your cricket pitch has been washed away for the 10th time that decade. Honduras isn't terrible at football. They're average. They've had a few decent players come out of Honduras. The problem is poverty, lack of money, corruption. Um, it used to be East Pakistan, the province of East Pakistan, but yes. Yeah, when it was East and West Pakistan, it was a province. It was the province of East Pakistan. There was a brutal conflict in the 70s. I think it was either 73 or 77. I can't remember, but the country's not much older than me. About a decade older than me. Poverty, natural disasters, flooding, and cyclones. Um, they've had political instability at times, well, not all the time. So it's a country much like Honduras with football, where there is a lack of funding, lack of money, corruption, poverty, infrastructure is not great, um, and so that has a bearing on development because you've got a lack of stability. It does ultimately have an impact on development, stability, and funding. Um, but Bangladesh isn't terrible at cricket. They've got the player base, they've got the fan base. It's just they haven't had the economic and political stability behind it to drive it forward. They're getting there. Um, they are improving. They're not terrible. They're not terrible. Um, but you've got to understand the history of the country before you judge. But again, it really does come down to a whole multitude of factors. There's a reason why in Great Britain's crap at basketball facilities, funding, and interest, and player base. There's a whole range of factors that contribute or influence an outcome. Um, and we discussed the Olympic legacy of a decade ago, right? As soon as the Olympics ended, many sports, including basketball, had their funding cut or removed entirely. Now, there's clearly a willingness from people in the UK to play and watch the sport and support the sport. In reality, is there enough interest there? Can Zimbabwe ever be good again? I think the damage for Zimbabwe has been done by the Mugabe regime, even and the political and economic instability that's resulted from that. The brain drain or the talent drain, as it's known. Like the Curran brothers, all three of them could play for Zimbabwe through their father. They've chosen to play for England. Let that sink in. I think Ian Thorpe could have played for Zimbabwe. Bruce Grobbelaar, for example, obviously played the majority of his career here. Um, Unfortunately, because of the Mugabe era and of course the conflict prior to Zimbabwe in '82 being founded, of course you've got the civil conflict beforehand um, in Rhodesia. Um, Ultimately, it has led to a talent drain, a brain drain, and many players of all backgrounds and athletes not wanting to represent Zimbabwe, be it white Zimbabweans or black Zimbabweans, for a variety of reasons. And there is also that political threat of political violence because they didn't support Mugabe or his successors. Um, I don't know with Zimbabwe. Unfortunately, they could have had the opportunity in rugby union and cricket to be a pretty good international team. But as I say, same with Bangladesh, political violence, instability, poverty has an impact where, unfortunately, a lot of talented players of a variety of sports have gone overseas to play. Well, I forget who it is who played for Australia rugby union, was born in Zimbabwe. Um, and he moved to Australia at like the age of 15. It's going to annoy me now. Um, it's not Hooper, it's the other one, back row forward. He had some bad injuries in his career, but he was a fantastic flanker. And a couple of cricketers like the Currans could have, Sam and Ben and Tom could have all played for Zimbabwe. They chose to play for England. Thorpe, former England opener, could have played for Zimbabwe. Sorry. Uh, so there's been a fair few players of cricket and rugby union from Zimbabwe who've either gone to another Commonwealth country like Australia or New Zealand or the UK to continue their studies and playing, or their parents when they were young moved over there, who by eligibility rules could play for Zimbabwe, choose not to, which is a problem. And unfortunately, there's the economic situation in Zimbabwe. Funding's an issue. The infrastructure's just not there anymore. Um, so it's one of them. Does the UK have a team in the EuroLeague? EuroLeague doesn't have much of a EuroLeague. What are we talking about? Basketball? Um, I don't know. I don't know on that one. I wouldn't have thought so. I know, obviously, um, basketball in this country again. It, I think it's been hampered by the funding cut after the 2012 Olympics. It benefited with the injection of funding in the build-up to the 2012 Olympics over the other the 2008-2012 Olympic cycle. Um, and we've been discussing over the years the Olympic legacy and making sure that the facilities are not underused, and they haven't been. I think the last decade or so, the Olympic facilities have been like the Copper Box and the London Stadium and some of the Olympic facilities have not been underused at all. And the legacies there, the Olympic Village, the Athletes Village has now been turned over to social and private housing. So there's communities are benefiting. Um, Travel infrastructure has benefited in that part of East London. Um, but the funding side of things and the win at all costs mentality side of things, there have been some negative impacts from that Olympics. I'm assuming you talk about the EuroLeague basketball. I don't think we have a team. If we do, we're not very good. But what we've now learned over the last decade about some of the sporting organisations and their culture and their complaints process and the athlete welfare and distribution of funding and a whole host of other issues as a result of post 2012 raised some eyebrows about how we as a sporting nation goes forward. Are we talking about ice hockey? There's always issues with British ice hockey, including what team is going to have the next off off season scandal, as in or scare of that existence, arena availability, quality of arenas, um, stability is something. I wouldn't say that there's problems with ice hockey in the UK. I think it's grown massively over the last 15 years. I do think though it's off ice stability that is the issue. I think governance could be better. I think we should have a unified governing body, not several. We don't actually have a UK ice hockey governing body. It's English, it's Scottish. There's several layers, which I think is a problem. Um, but as things currently stand, I think the sport is in a healthier position now than what it was. I'm going to say in the mid 2000s after the Super League collapsed. I think the sport is in a much healthier position now than what it was 20 years ago. Um, and I honestly do mean that. I think, yes, the sport is in a much, but no, I think the sport is in a much, much better place than what it was when I was a kid. I think there's no doubt on that. And I think we've had a generation of what I call the Mighty Ducks generation, which is my generation, which grew up watching the Mighty Ducks film, and then wanted to play, who have come through following the Super League collapse, who have kicked the sport on. And I think the rise of social media has helped with access to the highlights and the Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and access to the NHL. Obviously, what we've seen with the national side and the successes, and a few little failures along the way, but Liam Hurt getting drafted suddenly made big headlines, especially across the Atlantic. They were like, what? But it created shockwaves over here. So there's been a lot of positives. I think, again, what I think the problems are is governance. Absolutely, governance is, I think, what's holding the sport back, and to a certain extent, finances, and possibly a TV deal, but a better TV deal. But on saying that, I think the sport's in a healthier position now than what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so in the last 20 years, the sport has gone through a lot, but I think it's in a better position now than what it was when I was 10, 12, 13 years old. I think there's been a lot of ups and downs. My local team's had to move. The arena that I grew up watching games in is gone. One of our biggest rivals, their arena's falling down. There are some issues. A lot of it's to do with infrastructure. But as I said, the sport's in a better place. But ice hockey is one of those sports globally that sometimes are precarious with finances. It's a very expensive sport to run and play. Equipment costs a lot, running costs, and arena availability as well, because most arenas are multi-use. So it is what it is. But I wouldn't say that. I think the solutions outweigh the problems. I think the growth is there. The growth has been there. The fan base is solid. Social media has helped. There's more accessibility now than what there was before. I think it's a reasonably priced product. That's a lot cheaper than football to go and watch. A lot cheaper. And we will hopefully see the sport continue to grow, and hopefully down the line there's better facilities and better maintained facilities and better infrastructure put in place as the years progress. But that's a good question to end on. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Yes, we'll be sourcing out a haircut at some point later today, and then we will have the next video. I should have no hair. So thank you very much, obviously, for all your comments and questions. They've been very, very interesting. I really do appreciate it. We've now hit 1,000 subscribers. So that's one milestone hit. Monetization side of things, we've got to get the view hours up. We've got to get, working on other bits and pieces to do with the channel that will help the channel hit that monetization goal and get verified. So that's something else we've got to work on. But no, I do appreciate all the continued support. There's been some great questions put forward today. We've discussed a lot. Obviously, a lot of football-based questions, which is understandable. I'll have to double check what's going on with the football. I think if Arsenal wins today, I think it's their title to lose. I think Man City and Liverpool, I think their window now is closing slightly. It'll be interesting to see what Guardiola and Klopp, how long they actually stay at their respective clubs. Graham Potter and Chelsea, that's up in the air. With what's going on with Stamford at Stamford Bridge. Lampard at Everton, the clock's ticking on that one. And we will see what happens there. And I expect more things to happen. Oh, look, there are so many stories about Garincha and some of the things that happen in his private life, whether they're legends or not, or it's all tongue in cheek. It's allegedly it happened with Garincha. But if you watch any documentary or any documentary looking at the Brazil national side and they discuss Garincha, that story gets brought up a lot. Now, maybe it's urban legend, but yeah, there's a lot of stories about Garincha. And yeah, he died young, and he was an alcoholic. He did drink a lot, and he drank. And Socrates, another heavy smoker, heavy drink, and that's something that I think It's going to get brought up every time there's a player who has an addiction issue. We're going to go, or an athlete, who say it's happened before. It will continue to happen. Yeah, there's no smoke without fire. There's all sorts of rumours around Garincha and his prowess, let's just say, and certain bits of his anatomy are quite famous in Brazil. There are rumours surrounding Garincha, alleged. Obviously, the guy's dead, and so obviously he can't speak for what they are, but possibly one of the prototype winger, possibly the best winger to ever play the game. And that's me being brutally honest, possibly the best winger to play the game. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'm going to sort myself out this afternoon. The hair will be cutting off, and I'll have some more content for you very, very soon.